Before there was lightning, there was silence. Not the quiet of night, nor the hush before rain. This was the stillness of nothingness, a breath unbreathed, a moment before moments existed. In that emptiness something stirred, a pulse beneath the endless dark, slow and patient, like a thought forming for the first time. From this pulse came a whisper, a warning, that a child would rise against the devourer of worlds. Far beneath the heavens, the ancient earth shuddered, dreaming of a son not yet born, one who would defy the inevitable, unseat a king, and shape the order of gods themselves. But his beginning was not thunder or light. It was terror, secrecy, and exile. Before Olympus there was a cave. Before kingship, a cradle of stone. And before the storm, there was the child who would grow to command it. This is the story of Zeus, the Stormbringer, the unmaker of titans, the law hidden in the clouds, the god who would one day decide the balance of the world. But even gods begin as fragile things. What kind of divinity could rise from fear itself? In the beginning there was nothing, no sky to gaze upon, no ocean to cradle the stars, no echo to remind the dark that it existed. Only chaos, a boundless void that was not emptiness, but potential. Imagine standing at the edge of everything and feeling the heartbeat of creation before it knows it's alive. That was the beginning. Out of chaos came the first presence, Gaia, the earth. She was not born in the way mortals are born, for there were no mothers yet, no fathers, no time. She simply was solid, patient, the body upon which all else would rest. Her breath became wind. Her sorrow became rivers, her laughter, the rustle of forests yet unmade. And then came Tartarus, deep and endless, the pit beneath all things. If Gaia was the surface, Tartarus was the wound beneath it, an abyss so vast that even silence feared to fall into it. They were opposites, yet twins in purpose, the foundation and the void, creation and its shadow. Between them pulsed Eros, the force that drew all things together, the longing that made chaos crave form. It was not love as mortals know it, but attraction itself, the gravity of existence seeking itself. Through Eros, the void began to take shape. Stars shimmered in the black like scattered embers. Light found a place to dance, and darkness learned to hold it. The first breaths of the cosmos were heavy and slow, like the sighs of a being awakening from an endless dream. From Gaia's vast body, mountains began to rise like bones pushing through skin. Rivers carved her surface. Clouds gathered over her breath. She was becoming a world. But creation is never content, it desires company. Gaia, in her solitude, birthed Uranus, the sky, to be her equal and her mate. He stretched above her, cloaking her in stars. Their union was both beautiful and terrible, for from it came life that did not yet know what it meant to live. Their children were vast, immortal beings, titans, each one embodying a fragment of the cosmos. Oceanus, who wrapped the world in endless water. Hyperion, the light of dawn. Iapetus, the measure of mortality. And among them, Cronus, the youngest and the sharpest, who watched the stars not with wonder, but with ambition. But even paradise carries within it the seed of its own rebellion. Uranus, in his fear of what he had created, forced the youngest of Gaia's children deep within her body. The Cyclopes, with their single blazing eyes, and the Centimanes, the hundred-handed giants, were locked beneath the earth's crust, buried alive within their mother's womb. Gaia groaned beneath the weight of their cries, and her grief turned to fury. In the darkness, she shaped a weapon, a blade of adamantine, harder than stone, sharper than the truth. She called to her children to take it, to rise, to free her from the cruelty of the sky. Yet only one dared step forward, the youngest, the cunning one, Cronus. When night fell, Uranus descended to lay upon Gaia once more, his stars pressing close to her skin. But from the shadows Cronus struck. The blade fell, the sky bled, and from the wound, the heavens split open. The stars trembled. From the blood that fell into the sea, strange forms began to stir, creatures of vengeance, desire, and fate. The Furies were born that night, whispering justice into the silence. And from the foam of the waves, beauty itself would one day rise. Aphrodite, born of divine violence and sorrow. As Uranus vanished into the farthest reaches of the sky, his last words echoed through the void like thunder. One day, you too will be betrayed by your own child. Cronus stood victorious, but his mother's face did not smile. In the shadows of her new world, the prophecy already took root. The cycle of rebellion had begun, and as the first age of the Titans dawned, the earth grew quieter, but not calmer. The heavens no longer bled, but they waited. Every god born from that moment would carry the echo of that wound. Was the world meant to be ruled, or only understood? The sky had fallen silent. Where Uranus once stretched proud and infinite, now there was only the shiver of stars and the taste of vengeance lingering in the wind. The blade that severed heaven from earth lay buried deep in Gaia's soil, humming softly, like thunder waiting to be born again. Cronus, the youngest of Gaia's sons, now stood as ruler of all that existed. He was cunning where his father had been cruel, ambitious where his siblings were content. And yet, beneath his calm, there pulsed something darker, a seed of fear inherited from the very sky he had dethroned. For in the blood of Uranus, in that act of rebellion, destiny had written its own warning. The son who slays his father shall one day be slain by his own. But for now the earth blossomed with new life. The rule of the Titans had begun. The 12 children of Gaia and Uranus rose as pillars of existence. Oceanus, whose body encircled the world like a serpent of water, became the father of all rivers and seas. Beside him was Tethys, who nursed every current and spring. Hyperion, radiant with the fire of the sun, brought dawn and dusk, while Thea, shimmering as starlight, crowned him with brilliance. There was Zeus, keeper of the celestial axis, whose gaze reached beyond mortal comprehension, and his consort Phoebe, whose thoughts illuminated the dark corners of prophecy. Crius, the titan of constellations, stretched his arms across the heavens, marking time itself. Iapetus, quiet and contemplative, sowed the first seeds of mortality, an idea that even gods would one day ponder with unease. And then, towering above them all, Cronus, their leader, their liberator, their soon-to-be tyrant. At first, the world thrived. Mountains breathed under sunlight. The seas hummed with purpose, and mortals had not yet been imagined. The air was heavy with harmony, but harmony never lasts. Cronus, sitting upon his throne of stone, began to feel the weight of the prophecy pressing against his heart. He could hear his father's last words in every storm. You too will be overthrown. To drown that voice, Cronus sought control. He built a kingdom that stretched across eternity. From the golden halls of Mount Othries, he watched over creation with unblinking vigilance. No new god was born without his knowing. No wind moved without his consent. But even in his triumph, Gaia felt unease. Her son had freed her from the cruelty of Uranus, yet he had replaced it with a colder, quieter tyranny. Cronus feared the future more than his father had feared rebellion, and fear is the seed of all downfall. In the shadow of his reign, strange forces stirred. From the drops of Uranus's blood that had fallen upon the earth, the Furies roamed, seeking to punish those who betrayed their kin. From the foam that kissed the waves, Aphrodite had yet to rise, a promise of beauty born from destruction. The world was still forming, still raw, still wild. Among the Titans, whispers began to spread. Some saw in Cronus not a king, but a reflection of the father he had slain. Rhea, his sister and queen, watched him in silence, her eyes heavy with worry. She loved him once for his courage, but courage had soured into suspicion. One night, as the stars flickered over Othries, Rhea asked softly, "Will you ever trust what you've built?" Cronus looked past her, to the heavens that no longer spoke. "Only when the sky forgets my father's curse," he answered. But the sky forgets nothing. In the depths of Gaia's heart, the cycle of life and vengeance turned unseen. The Titans ruled, but they did not understand that time itself was moving, slow, invisible, unrelenting. The universe was learning to change, and deep within that change, something new was forming. A force greater than titans, greater than fear, greater even than prophecy. A force that would one day wear the shape of a storm. For every empire born of violence carries the rhythm of its own undoing. And Cronus, the king of the Titans, had just begun to hear the faint echo of it, like distant thunder beyond the horizon. Can peace ever grow from the shadow of betrayal? The golden age of the Titans stretched across the heavens like an unbroken dawn. Under Cronus's rule, the rivers ran smooth, crops grew in endless abundance, and the stars moved in perfect harmony. It was said that mortals, though still primitive, lived without hunger, disease, or grief. The world itself seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a calm too perfect to last. But even perfection has a heartbeat, and in that rhythm, fear began to whisper. Cronus ruled from his high throne upon Mount Othrys, the stone cold beneath his touch. He was surrounded by wealth beyond imagining. Silver rivers of starlight, winds perfumed with the breath of the gods, golden orchards that never aged. Yet his eyes were restless. At every banquet, at every hymn sung in his name, his thoughts drifted backward, to the moment he had overthrown Uranus. The sound of the blade cutting through the heavens haunted him. And worse, the echo of his father's curse. One day your own child will rise against you. Prophecy to the divine is not mere prediction, it is gravity. No matter how far a god tries to flee, destiny pulls. And so Cronus began to fear the future more than he feared defeat. Rhea, his wife and sister, bore him many children. One by one, she presented them to the Titan king, hoping to see the father's pride bloom across his face. Yet every time she saw only terror. For each infant's cry was a reminder that fate had found a new voice. The firstborn, Hestia, glowed with warmth. Cronus looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, tenderness crossed his face. But then he saw the fire in her eyes, a reflection of himself, and the whisper of prophecy returned. Without a word, he seized the child and swallowed her whole. The act was not out of cruelty, but desperation. Cronus believed that if he could trap his children within himself, he could prevent their rebellion. In his mind, he was preserving his reign, not destroying his bloodline. But the world trembled at the act. Gaia wept, and Rhea screamed. The sun dimmed for a day, yet Cronus did not stop. When Demeter was born, he devoured her too. Then Hera, whose cry echoed like a wounded storm. Hades, cold and quiet, disappeared next. And finally, Poseidon, strong and restless as the sea. Each swallowed child was another layer of silence within him, another heartbeat he tried to erase. Rhea's grief turned to rage. The halls of Othrys grew heavy with her sorrow. She would walk among the Titans, her hands trembling, her voice quiet, and the world seemed to mourn with her. The rivers began to slow. The wind lost its joy. Even the stars flickered with unease. And still, Cronus refused to listen. He told himself he was protecting the balance, ensuring peace. But peace born of fear is only the quiet before collapse. Every choice he made to defy fate only bound him tighter to it. Then, one night, Gaia appeared to Rhea in a dream. The earth herself rose from the soil, her eyes like molten stone, her voice the hum of creation. "My daughter," she said, "you carry within you a secret that will end this cycle. But you must be cunning. Do not fight prophecy, shape it." When Rhea awoke, she felt the stir of new life inside her, her sixth child. And in her heart, she knew this one must be hidden from Cronus's hunger. The months that followed were filled with deception. Rhea smiled at her husband when she had to. She played her role in his golden court. But beneath her calm, her heart pounded with defiance. When her time came, she fled beneath moonlight, following the whispers of Gaia to a distant land, the island of Crete, where the winds spoke softly and the mountains hid secrets in their stone. There, in a cave cloaked by mist, surrounded by nymphs and stars, Rhea gave birth to her final child. The boy did not cry at first. His eyes were open, alert, unafraid. In his small chest, there was the quiet rhythm of something ancient and patient, as if he already understood the weight of destiny. Rhea held him close, whispering, "Your name shall be Zeus, and you will not be devoured." Outside, the wind howled like distant thunder. To protect her son, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented it to Cronus. The Titan, blind with paranoia, never questioned it. He swallowed the stone whole, sealing his fate with the sound of false victory. Meanwhile, far across the sea, the child of prophecy slept in a cave of shadows, guarded by spirits and fed by a goat named Amalthea. Every time the infant cried, the Kurit's warrior protectors clashed their bronze shields to drown out his voice, so that no ear in heaven or earth would hear the future being born. And for the first time, Gaia smiled, because what Cronus could not see was that destiny does not strike from the outside. It grows quietly from within the silence you create to avoid it. The ruler of the Titans had eaten a stone. The world had swallowed a lie, and the next age had just begun to breathe. Can destiny ever be swallowed? Or does it always find its way out? The cave on Mount Dict was hidden behind a curtain of ivy and mist. Only the wind knew the way, and even it moved softly there, as though afraid to disturb the secret the earth was keeping. Inside, Rhea lay upon stone worn smooth by time, her breath shallow, her heart torn between terror and wonder. In her arms, the newborn god blinked at the darkness. His eyes were the color of storms not yet formed, deep and silver. This was Zeus, the sixth child she had brought into a world that devoured its own beginnings. He was small, fragile even, but the air around him already trembled with unseen energy. When he moved, sparks flickered faintly along the cave walls, like the promise of thunder dreaming itself awake. Outside, the nymphs whispered ancient lullabies. Amalthea, the divine goat, stepped near and bent her head to feed the child with milk warm as morning. From her horns flowed golden light that lit the chamber like dawn returning to a forgotten sky. Each drop that fell to the ground became a flower, blooming even in the cave's eternal night. Rhea watched in silence. This hidden cradle was her rebellion, her answer to the cruelty of fate. For the first time in an age, she smiled. But her joy carried weight, the kind that comes from defiance. Every heartbeat of this infant was a lie told to the king of time himself. Back upon Mount Othrys, Cronus sat upon his throne of obsidian. The air in his court was heavy with incense and unease. When Rhea returned, pale and trembling, he demanded the newborn at once. She handed him a bundle wrapped in linen, its weight carefully arranged. Cronus felt the form beneath the cloth, round, firm, silent. He did not notice how Rhea's hands shook. Without hesitation, he swallowed the false child whole. A sound like thunder rolled through the hall as the stone passed his throat. Then quiet. The prophecy, he thought, had been silenced once more. But the earth knew better. On Crete, life continued in secret. The Kurit's, young warriors sworn to protect the infant, kept watch at the mouth of the cave. Whenever the child cried, they struck their bronze shields together, filling the air with a clash so loud it swallowed the sound of destiny itself. The mountains echoed with their rhythm, a song of deception and protection woven into the bones of the world. Years unfolded gently. The boy grew strong on honey and the milk of Amalthea. The nymph Adrastea taught him laughter. Ida taught him patience. Crete taught him to listen, to the pulse of the earth, to the breath of storms gathering beyond sight. Zeus learned the music of wind before he could speak. He learned that power did not roar. It waited. Sometimes, when night fell, he would crawl to the cave's mouth and stare at the sky. He didn't know the name of the stars yet, but he felt something calling from beyond them, a promise older than memory. The same blood that had once toppled Uranus hummed quietly in his veins. Rhea visited when she could, veiled and silent, bringing gifts of fruit and whispered stories of his siblings, the brothers and sisters trapped within their father's stomach. She would not cry in front of him, but her voice broke each time she spoke of them. "Your brother Poseidon sleeps in darkness," she murmured once, "and Hades dreams of a world beneath the world. But you, my son, you were born beneath the open sky. Remember the air. It is your birthright." Zeus listened, his small hand resting upon hers. Time, the domain of Cronus, continued its slow circle. Yet even the god of time could not feel it slipping. His kingdom glittered with gold, but beneath its foundation, whispers grew. The earth began to tremble faintly, as if remembering the first wound ever cut into it. On Crete, the child became youth. He could outrun the mountain winds, wrestle the roots of trees, and calm beasts with a glance. The Curetes watched in awe as lightning sometimes danced at his fingertips when he was angered or afraid. They began to call him Thunder's heir. But power, even hidden, cannot remain still forever. The day came when Gaia herself appeared before the young god, rising from the soil like mist taking shape. Her voice was the rumble of distant earth. "Child of the storm," she said, "the time of hiding ends. Your father's fear has chained the world. The sky waits to be reclaimed, and the swallowed gods call out from his belly. Will you answer them?" Zeus stood silent for a long moment. The mountain winds gathered around him, tugging at his hair. For the first time, lightning cracked across the sky above Crete. Not wild, but deliberate. "I will," he said simply. Far away on Mount Othrys, Cronus stirred in his sleep. He did not know why, but his dreams turned dark and restless. Somewhere, faint and far, thunder rolled, the sound of a secret finally remembering its own voice. And so the balance of the cosmos shifted once more. The son of the devourer had grown strong enough to be heard, though not yet seen. The silence that had protected him was ending. The prophecy that had been buried beneath deceit began to rise again, like a tide returning to shore. What power lies in something small, unseen, and forgotten? High upon Mount Ida, the world felt alive. The wind carried the scent of honey and stone. Distant streams whispered through the valleys below. The cave that had once sheltered an infant now echoed with the low hum of something divine, a rhythm between storm and silence. The child of prophecy was no longer a secret. He was becoming a force. Zeus grew beneath the vigilant eyes of his guardians. Amalthea, his foster mother, watched him with an affection beyond nature. The nymphs Adrastea and Ida danced around him, teaching him to move with grace and strength, while the Curetes drilled him in combat, bronze shields gleaming as they struck them in ritual rhythm. The clang of metal had once been a disguise to hide his cries. Now it was an anthem, a sound that announced his awakening power. Every day, the boy would climb higher into the mountain's mist. He would press his palm to the clouds, listening, feeling. Somewhere inside him, he sensed that the air obeyed his will. When he was angry, winds rose. When he laughed, lightning flickered faintly behind the peaks. He began to understand. Storms were not born from chaos. They were born from him. At night, the world seemed to whisper to him. The stars pulsed faintly when he looked upon them. The earth beneath his feet vibrated with a familiar heartbeat, the same one that had stirred in the void before all things began. And though he didn't yet know it, that heartbeat was destiny knocking softly from the other side of time. But even as he grew in strength, Zeus was haunted by the quiet knowledge of his origin. Rhea's visits were rare and fleeting, but when they came, she brought truth with her. "My son," she told him one evening as the cave glowed with firelight, "you are the child of defiance, the one Cronus fears. He swallowed your brothers and sisters to prevent this very moment, to stop you from becoming who you were born to be." Zeus's eyes glinted. "Then he will release them," he said. His voice, though young, held something ancient, an unshakable certainty. Rhea touched his cheek. "One day, but you must learn more than anger. Power without patience becomes tyranny. You are your father's son, never forget that. But you must not become him." Those words sank deep into Zeus's heart. For years, he trained in silence, mastering not only strength but restraint. He watched storms form and fade without commanding them. He learned that true power lies not in chaos, but in control. And yet, destiny was impatient. One night, a storm unlike any before gathered above Crete. The clouds were dark as iron, their edges pulsing with fire. Thunder cracked the sky open like a wound. The Koreets ran to the cave, calling his name. Inside, Zeus stood barefoot on the stone floor, arms raised to the heavens. The wind tore through the cave, circling him, bending to his will. Lightning flashed again, and this time it did not strike randomly. It struck where he pointed. The storm answered him. When the fury finally faded, Amalthea lay trembling at his feet. One of her horns had broken from the blast. Zeus fell to his knees beside her, remorse flooding his eyes. Gently, he touched the shattered horn, and light poured from his fingertips. The horn refilled with golden nectar, endless and pure. From that day forward, it became known as the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, a symbol of abundance born from accident and compassion. It was then that Gaia appeared to him once more. Her form shimmered between woman and mountain, her voice like wind through ancient roots. "You have learned strength," she said softly, "and now mercy. But there is one lesson yet, to face fear. Your father's time draws thin. The world begins to choke on his paranoia. The sky trembles because he does not trust it to stand still. The hour approaches when the sun must rise." Zeus lowered his gaze. "How can I defeat him? He has swallowed gods." Gaia smiled faintly, the kind of smile only eternity can wear. "Not all battles are won with thunder." With that, she placed in his hands a vial filled with a shimmering, amber liquid, the distilled essence of the earth herself. "When the time is right, pour this into your father's cup. Let the truth flow back into the world." The storm outside ceased. Silence returned, heavy but expectant. Zeus turned toward the mouth of the cave and stared across the sea. Beyond that horizon lay the kingdom of the Titans, where Cronus ruled from Mount Othrys. Somewhere within that mountain, his brothers and sisters slept in darkness. He clenched his hand around the vial. "I will free them," he whispered, and as he spoke, the wind stirred, soft at first, then rising. The clouds gathered once more, but not in chaos. This was not a storm born of anger. It was one of purpose. The air itself seemed to bow before him. The child of thunder had become its master. Far away, Cronus sat upon his throne, suddenly uneasy. A chill moved through the hall, though no window was open. The torches flickered. He thought he heard the faint clash of bronze, like shields in the distance. He looked to the horizon, but saw only calm skies. He could not yet know that those same skies had chosen their new king. Can the smallest sound one day echo louder than the heavens? In the palace of Mount Othrys, the halls glimmered like the veins of the world itself. Pillars of obsidian stretched toward a ceiling veiled in clouds, and fires burned without smoke, fed by the breath of titans. It was the age of grandeur, the rule of Cronus, lord of time, king of the golden age. Yet for all its splendor, something hollow echoed through his kingdom, like a song missing its final note. Cronus sat at the head of a vast banquet table, its surface carved from a single slab of crystal. Around him gathered the 12 titans, their eyes like suns, their voices deep as thunder. The air was thick with wine and power. Yet beneath the laughter, there was tension, an invisible thread of unease that even the gods could not name. "Tonight," Cronus declared, raising his goblet, "we celebrate 1,000 years of peace." The titans cheered, the sound rolling through the mountain like an earthquake. But as he drank, Cronus's gaze flickered toward the shadows at the far edge of the hall. For months, his dreams had been haunted by whispers, voices of his swallowed children echoing through his body, crying from within the darkness he carried inside him. They were not gone. They were waiting. And now, every gust of wind, every shift in the clouds, reminded him of prophecy. Somewhere beyond his sight, the sixth child, the one he had never seen, was alive. The curse of Uranus still followed him. The thought gnawed at his sanity. Across the hall, Rhea watched in silence. Her face betrayed nothing, but her heart beat wildly beneath her golden robes. She knew what her husband feared, and she knew that fear was already winning. Cronus turned to his court. "Tell me," he said, his tone sharp. "Have any of you heard of strange storms? Of voices carried on the wind." The hall fell quiet. Oceanus shifted uneasily. Hyperion frowned, his light dimming slightly. "My king," he said, "there have been tempests near Crete, but storms are the nature of the world." "No," Cronus interrupted. "These are not storms. They are messages." He slammed his goblet down. Wine splashed across the crystal table, red as blood. "The earth conspires against me. My own mother whispers rebellion into the soil." Rhea looked away, her breath caught in her throat. She had hidden Zeus for years now, but every mention of storm made her tremble. If Cronus ever discovered the truth, the world itself might tear apart. To distract him, she rose gracefully and poured more wine into his cup. "My lord," she said softly, "tonight is for peace, not paranoia. Drink, and let your dreams rest." Cronus studied her for a long moment. He saw only devotion, or thought he did. Slowly he nodded, taking the cup. The wine gleamed with the color of molten amber. He drank deeply. For a moment the hall was still. The Titans resumed their laughter. Music swelled from harps strung with golden hair. But inside Cronus, something stirred, something ancient and unstoppable. The potion, given to Zeus by Gaia herself, began its work. The laughter around him blurred. His body shuddered. The walls trembled as his breath caught in his throat. Titans leapt from their seats as Cronus let out a low, guttural cry. From his mouth, a flash of light erupted. Then another. The sound was not pain, it was release. And from within him came a flood of gods. First Hestia, glowing like fire reborn. Then Demeter, her hair flowing with vines and wheat. Hera, radiant and furious, burst forth with the cry of vengeance. Hades emerged cloaked in shadow, eyes cold as the void. And Poseidon, his roar shaking the very foundations of the hall. The swallowed gods had returned. The Titans stumbled back in disbelief as Cronus fell to his knees, gasping. His eyes burned with hatred. He looked up to find, standing before him, a young man cloaked in stormlight. The very air trembled around him. "Who are you?" Cronus demanded, his voice a rasp of dread. The stranger met his gaze. "I am the sun you tried to erase," he said. Lightning flickered in his palm, illuminating the hall. "The storm you feared." Zeus had returned. The Titans rose from their seats, the room vibrating with power as Cronus staggered upright. "You dare," he began, but Zeus raised a hand, and thunder answered him. The wine in the goblets quivered. The torches bent toward him. Even the mountains seemed to breathe. "The age of Titans is ending," Zeus said. His voice carried the calm of inevitability, the quiet before a storm that has already chosen where to strike. But Cronus only laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "You think you can defy time itself? I am the cycle, boy. You cannot defeat what you were born into." "Then I'll break the cycle," Zeus replied. And with that, lightning split the hall in two. The feast of celebration became a battlefield of destiny. The prophecy had begun its final verse. When the mighty celebrate, do they hear the quiet footsteps of fate? Smoke still hung over Mount Othrys. The echoes of that night's chaos had faded. Yet something new stirred in the air. Something quiet, patient, and deliberate. Zeus had not come merely to rebel. He had come to reclaim a world. But before war could ignite, strategy would have to outshine fury. For though Cronus's children were free, the Titans still ruled the heavens. Their power was vast, their armies endless. A direct assault would mean annihilation. The newly freed gods were young, brilliant, but untested. So Zeus did what no one expected a child of thunder to do. He vanished. Weeks passed. The court of Cronus tried to regain its calm. Though weakened from the convulsion that had released his children, the Titan king told himself he was victorious. The rebellion, he claimed, had been crushed before it began. Yet in the shadows of his halls, unease lingered. Every storm that rolled across the horizon made the servants tremble. Every whisper of wind felt like a warning. Then one evening, a a stranger arrived at the gates of Othries. He was cloaked in gray, his face hidden by the hood of a humble servant. In his hands he carried a simple goblet of bronze and spoke with a quiet voice. "I have come," he said, "to serve the king of time." The guards laughed. "Another fool seeking favor," one said. But when Cronus heard the words, he ordered the stranger brought to him. Perhaps he thought the servant's humility a welcome change from the fearful flattery that surrounded him. Perhaps he sensed the hidden gravity in that soft-spoken tone. The man bowed low before the throne. "My name is unknown, my loyalty absolute," he said. "Let me pour your wine, my lord, and I shall never let your cup run dry." Cronus stared for a moment, then nodded. "Serve," he said. And so, for days, the stranger worked quietly at the Titan's side. He spoke little, moving with grace that betrayed neither haste nor fear. When Cronus grew restless, he poured wine. When the court grew loud, he moved unseen. The king began to trust him. But in the stillness of night, while the fires burned low, the stranger would walk the empty corridors of the mountain. He would whisper to the stones themselves, and they would listen. Beneath his cloak, faint light shimmered, like distant lightning beneath clouds. The nymphs of Othries began to gossip. "There is something about him," they whispered. "His eyes, they flash, just for a moment." One dared to speak to him. "Cupbearer," she said, "you walk like a god." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps I've simply walked too close to one." That night, as Cronus sat alone in his hall, the stranger approached. "You look weary, my king," he said gently.
"J'ai lit for you."
Cronus nodded. The goblet filled. The wine shimmered strangely, reflecting flashes of light though no fire burned nearby. The king drank deeply, and the mountain shuddered. A sound like distant thunder rolled through the hall. Cronus's hands trembled. He felt something move inside him. Not pain, but release. He gasped as his strength faltered. The taste of the wine turned bitter. "What have you done?" he roared, his voice cracking through the stone. The stranger stepped back, his cloak falling from his shoulders. The hall filled with light. Lightning licked the edges of the throne, curling like serpents. "I've undone what you swallowed," Zeus said. "The world remembers itself again." Cronus staggered forward, eyes wide. "Zeus, my son." But the word son broke upon his tongue like a curse. From the shadows, the freed gods entered. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, their faces lit with divine fire. For the first time since their birth, they stood together. "This is not rebellion," Zeus said quietly. "It's restoration." Cronus's fury ignited the air. "You dare call it justice? I gave you peace. You gave the world silence," Zeus replied. "And silence is not peace. It's fear disguised as order." Cronus lunged. His hand struck like a storm itself, but Zeus met it with thunder. The two forces collided, shaking heaven and earth alike. Sparks cascaded across the walls, splitting stone, cracking sky. The titans outside felt the quake. The world was shifting. The younger gods gathered around their brother, united for the first time. Poseidon summoned waves from the air itself, water spiraling into existence. Hades spread his hand, and the shadows bent at his will. Hera's gaze burned with vengeance, her power radiating calm fury. The dawn of their reign had begun, not yet victorious, but inevitable. Cronus fell to one knee, his strength dimming as time itself seemed to slow around him. His voice trembled, not with fear, but disbelief. "You cannot win. You are my blood." Zeus stood over him, lightning arching along his arm. "Then you taught me well," he said. The sky outside erupted. Bolts of light pierced the clouds, painting the horizon in gold and fire. The mountain groaned beneath the weight of what was to come. The war of the ages, the Titanomachy, had been born in that instant. Cronus vanished into the storm, his form dissolving into the mist of time. But his voice lingered. "You will never escape me," it whispered through the thunder. "For every ruler becomes what he overthrows." Zeus lowered his head. He knew it was not entirely a lie. Behind him, the newly freed gods watched, uncertain but resolute. The world outside trembled as though aware that balance had shifted. The Titans would not surrender their crown without fire. The storm roared louder, echoing through heaven and earth. And the young god who had hidden in shadows now stood revealed, no longer a child of prophecy, but the Stormbringer himself. Is justice the act of returning what was stolen, or the beginning of something far more dangerous? Lightning split the heavens as the first war of gods began. The world had never known such sound, an orchestra of thunder, fire, and fury shaking the bones of creation. The air itself tore open as titans and gods clashed, their cries echoing through the vastness of time. This was Titanomachy, the war that would decide who ruled the universe. Zeus stood at the heart of the storm, his eyes burning with purpose. Around him gathered his siblings, the first pantheon of Olympus. Poseidon, lord of the sea-to-be, wielded a trident forged from the deepest waters. Hades, master of shadow and silence, moved through the battlefield unseen, striking from the dark. Hera, fierce and calculating, commanded the skies to shield her allies. Demeter and Hestia summoned life itself to rise against ruin, roots, vines, and fire intertwining in chaotic beauty. From their fortress on Mount Othrys, the Titans descended. Cronus led them, golden scythe in hand, its edge gleaming with the memory of rebellion. Behind him marched his brothers, Iapetus, the cold strategist, Hyperion, blazing like the sun's fury, Atlas, who bore the weight of the stars upon his shoulders. The earth quaked with each step they took. The battlefield was not a single place, it was the world itself. The mountains became shields, the oceans weapons. The sky burned like a forge where the fates themselves hammered destiny into form. For 10 years, the war raged without end. On the first day, Zeus hurled his lightning for the first time, not in rage but in command. The bolt struck the ground, splitting it open. Fire roared upward, forming a chasm between the armies. The Titans paused in awe, for none had seen such raw creation through destruction. Cronus raised his hand, his scythe glinting, and the air froze. "You learned rebellion from me?" Cronus said, his voice thundering over the chaos. "But you will die as I once did, by the hands of your own kin." Zeus met his father's gaze. "Then history ends here." The heavens answered. Storms collided with solar fire, lightning clashing against the glow of 1,000 suns. Mountains were shattered into dust. Rivers boiled into clouds. The world screamed beneath the weight of divine warfare. Mortals, still fragile and new, hid in caves, their hearts pounding with a terror they could not name. They would later call it thunder. As the years passed, neither side could claim victory. The gods were strong, but the Titans were ancient. Every battle ended as it began, in ruin, in exhaustion, in stalemate. Even Zeus began to doubt. But then, deep within the earth, a voice stirred. A voice older than the war, older than even the sky. It was Gaia. "You fight upon my body," she said, her tone trembling through the ground. "And every blow you strike tears into me. If you wish to win, you must descend. Seek my forgotten children, the ones your father imprisoned." Zeus listened. Beneath the roar of battle, he felt the faint heartbeat of the abyss, Tartarus, the endless pit where the most ancient beings had been locked away. The Cyclopes, masters of forge and flame. The Centimanes, creatures of 100 arms and 50 heads, beings of impossible might. He knew what he had to do. That night, while lightning danced quietly along the clouds, Zeus left the battlefield and descended into the earth. The journey was long and perilous. Rivers of fire coiled like serpents through the dark. The screams of fallen titans echoed in the distance. Yet Zeus did not falter. At the bottom of the abyss, he found them, the forgotten ones, bound in chains that pulsed with divine energy. Their eyes flickered weakly in the dark, but when they saw Zeus, hope rekindled. "Son of Cronus," said Briareus, the eldest of the 100-handed ones, "why do you disturb the damned? I come not to rule you, Zeus replied, but to free you. The same chains that hold you keep the world in darkness. He struck his lightning against their bonds. The air shook, metal turned to ash. One by one, the ancient prisoners rose, stretching their colossal forms. Gratitude filled their voices, but so did vengeance. In return, the Cyclopes offered gifts, symbols of loyalty and power. For Zeus, they forged the thunderbolt, drawn from the heart of storms. For Poseidon, the trident, carved from ocean's bone. For Hades, the helm of invisibility, made from the shadow between worlds. Use them wisely, the Cyclopes said, for these are not weapons, they are wills of the universe itself. Zeus bowed his head. Then let the universe choose its king. When he returned to the surface, dawn broke for the first time in a decade. The war reignited, fiercer than before. The newly armed gods struck with fury and precision. Zeus's lightning carved paths through mountains. Poseidon's trident shattered armies into floods. Hades moved unseen, sowing fear like winter through the Titan ranks. Even Cronus began to waver. His power, though vast, could not match the unity of the gods. For the first time, the Titans trembled. And so the war stretched into its final act, a dance of chaos and destiny. The gods fought not only for victory, but for existence itself. High above, the sky burned gold. The last strike was near. The world stood between two eternities, one ending, one just beginning. When creation becomes a battlefield, who shapes whom, the gods or the war itself? The 10th year of war dawned in smoke. The land was broken, its mountains cleaved open, rivers rerouted by falling stars. The skies no longer knew calm. Thunder became the language of the world. And yet, for all his strength, Zeus felt the strain of endless battle. His arm ached from lightning's weight. His siblings fought tirelessly beside him, and still the Titans held their ground. Cronus's army was unrelenting. Atlas bore the constellations like weapons, hurling burning stones across the heavens. Hyperion commanded sunlight like a blade, his brilliance blinding even gods. The older generation fought with experience born from the beginning of time itself. The younger gods had passion, but passion could not win a war of centuries. Then came the whisper, a familiar one. It rolled through the earth, deep and resonant. Zeus, said the voice of Gaia, you have fought long in the light, but true power waits in the dark. He listened. Beneath the battlefields, far below the roots of the world, slept the ones who could end the stalemate. The children of Gaia that Cronus had chained before his reign. The Cyclopes, masters of the forge, and the Centimanes, the 100-handed ones, whose strength was legend. So, while the Titans celebrated another victory, Zeus turned away from the battlefield and descended once more into Tartarus, the abyss without end. He carried only one weapon, faith. The descent was a journey through eternity. The walls dripped with fire. The screams of fallen Titans twisted in the wind. Even thunder dared not echo here. Yet Zeus continued, his light piercing the endless dark until it found the iron gates at the bottom of creation. Who disturbs the forgotten? Growled a voice. Zeus raised his lightning high. One who would end what never should have begun. Chains rattled. From the shadows stepped the Centimanes, monstrous yet magnificent, each with 50 heads and 100 arms. Their eyes glowed faintly like embers trapped in stone. Behind them, the Cyclopes labored in silence, hammering sparks from darkness itself. Cronus bound us for fear of our power, one Cyclops said. Why should we trust the blood of the one who betrayed us? Zeus stepped forward. Because I, too, was bound by his fear. Because no world ruled by terror deserves to live in it. Stand with me, and when the sky clears, your names will be sung again. For a moment, the abyss was quiet. Then the eldest Cyclops, Argesh, whose single eye burned like the sun, spoke. Then we shall forge what only gods can wield. The forge of Tartarus erupted in light. For 3 days and nights, the Cyclopes shaped weapons from the essence of the cosmos itself. From lightning's core, they forged Zeus's thunderbolt, a weapon of pure will. For Poseidon, they drew from the deep and shaped the trident sharp enough to split the sea from the sky. For Hades, they sculpted the helm of darkness, a crown of invisibility, woven from the shadow of forgotten things. When they finished, the abyss trembled. The gods held in their hands the balance of existence. The Centimanes stepped forward, their voices like avalanches. "We will fight beside you," they said. "For the world that imprisoned us must now tremble before our freedom." And so they rose from Tartarus, each step shaking mountains, each breath scattering storms. When they reached the surface, the Titans froze. Even Cronus, for all his arrogance, knew fear then. The war reignited. Zeus unleashed his new weapon, and lightning rained like judgment. The Cyclopes hurled molten rock at the armies of Othries, their hammers singing hymns of vengeance. Poseidon's trident struck the ground, summoning waves that swallowed valleys whole. Hades vanished into shadow, emerging behind Titan generals and pulling them into the earth. Hera and Demeter raised tempests of wind and harvest, twisting the air into chaos. But it was the Centimanes who broke the balance. With 100 hands, they hurled mountains as though they were pebbles. The air filled with the thunder of colliding worlds. The Titans fought back, their flames reaching the clouds, their strength tearing the seas apart, but the tide had turned. Cronus called upon time itself, slowing the flow of battle. For a heartbeat, all movement ceased. The lightning froze midair, the rain hung like glass in the sky. He turned toward Zeus, his eyes burning with desperation. "You cannot kill time," Cronus said. "You are bound to me. Even your thunder will fade." Zeus smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but even time must bow before change." He raised his hand. The thunderbolt struck, shattering the illusion. The frozen storm exploded into motion, light tearing through the clouds like a scream of creation. Cronus fell backward, dazed but not yet defeated. All around, the Titans began to falter. Oceanus retreated into the depths. Iapetus was wounded and vanished into the mist. The sky itself groaned under the weight of divine war. And in that chaos, the young gods stood unbroken. Zeus looked upon his allies, the freed children of the abyss, and saw what Cronus never had: strength in unity, not fear. The war was far from over, but the tide had shifted forever. Do gifts of power free us, or bind us to the destiny they were forged to fulfill? The end began not with a scream, but with a silence so deep that even thunder hesitated to break it. For 10 long years, the war between gods and Titans had burned through creation itself, turning oceans into steam and mountains into ash. Now both armies stood upon the edge of finality. The battlefield stretched from the peaks of Mount Othries to the very rim of Tartarus. The air was thick with smoke and divine residue. The ground, once sacred, was a wasteland of molten stone. The Titans, massive and weary, stood in ranks like dying stars. The gods, young but unyielding, gathered in a ring of light that pierced the storm. Between them, time seemed to hold its breath. At the center stood Cronus, scythe gleaming in his grasp, his eyes wild but resolute. The king of the old world was unbroken, though his power flickered with every heartbeat. Before him stood Zeus, his hand wrapped around the thunderbolt, its glow illuminating the faces of his siblings. Lightning coiled around his arm, whispering like a living thing. "This ends today," Zeus said, his voice carrying across the battlefield, calm but absolute. Cronus's laughter was hoarse, echoing through the smoke. "Ends? No, boy, nothing ends. The father falls, the son rises, and one day he will fall too. That is the law." Zeus tightened his grip. "Then let this be the last time that law is written." The skies darkened as both armies prepared their final charge. The Centimanes, standing behind Zeus, roared, a sound that split mountains in half. The Cyclopes raised their hammers high, their forges glowing brighter than the sun. The Titans, unwilling to bow, gathered their last strength. Hyperion's light flared, Iapetus raised his spear, and Atlas lifted the heavens as both shield and weapon. The first strike came from Cronus. He swung his scythe, and time itself bent. Lightning froze midair. Waves stopped mid-crash. Zeus found himself suspended, his arm half raised. For a heartbeat, the king of time smiled. But within that stillness, something moved, slow at first, then unstoppable. The thunderbolt pulsed, defying the command of its maker. A crack split the frozen air. Time shattered. Zeus broke through the moment like dawn through night. The thunderbolt screamed from his hand, a spear of pure light. It struck Cronus' scythe, and the world exploded. The blast tore open the clouds. The heavens turned white. The earth trembled so violently that rivers reversed their flow. When the light dimmed, Cronus was on his knees, his weapon split in two. Still he rose. "You are your father's son," he spat. "Do you think the world will not fear you as it feared me?" Zeus's gaze softened, not with mercy, but understanding. "Perhaps," he said, "but I will not rule through fear." He lifted his arm once more, and the thunder answered. The bolt struck Cronus squarely in the chest. For an instant, the Titan King shone brighter than the sun, and then he fell. The ground opened beneath him, vast and unending. The Titans cried out as the pit of Tartarus yawned wide, swallowing their fallen king. The Centimanes stepped forward, casting chains forged from the bones of the earth itself. One by one, the Titans were bound, Atlas, Hyperion, Iapetus, and all who followed Cronus into rebellion. Their screams echoed into eternity as they were dragged into the abyss, their forms dissolving into myth. Zeus stood at the edge of the chasm, his face lit by the last flickers of lightning. He could feel the weight of victory pressing against his chest, heavy, solemn, inevitable. The sky was his now. The sea belonged to Poseidon. The underworld would become Hades's domain. A new order was dawning. But victory is never pure. Behind him, the battlefield lay in ruin. The gods looked upon the devastation and knew they had remade the world, but at a cost. The rivers no longer sang. The forests whispered of loss. Even the stars seemed dimmer, as if mourning the age that had passed. Zeus raised his hand, and the storm finally began to calm. Rain fell gently upon the scorched earth, washing away the ashes of war. For the first time in an age, the world exhaled. The gods gathered around him. Hera, regal even in exhaustion, touched his arm. "It's over," she said softly. Zeus looked at her, his expression unreadable. "No," he murmured. "It's only beginning." They stood in silence as the chasm sealed behind them, the last echoes of Titan voices fading into the depths. Above, the clouds parted, revealing a pale sun, the first dawn of the new world. From that day, the age of Titans was over. The age of Olympus had begun. But even as peace settled upon creation, a question lingered in the quiet between thunderclaps. Is victory the end of conflict, or only its beginning? The war had ended, but silence did not bring peace. For the first time since the dawn of existence, the skies above the world were clear. No storms raged, no fires burned, and the cries of Titans had faded into distant memory. The world, broken and scarred, waited to see what would rise from the ashes. Zeus stood upon the highest peak of Mount Othrys, staring at the battlefield below. The earth still smoked, but in that haze he saw possibility. He had not simply destroyed the old order, he had inherited its burden. The heavens were now his to shape, the world his to balance. And yet he felt no triumph. Victory had a hollow sound when the thunder went quiet. Behind him, his siblings gathered, Poseidon, eyes reflecting the restless waves. Hades, silent as shadow. Hera, proud and watchful. Demeter, her touch already coaxing green from the scorched ground. And Hestia, her gentle flame glowing with hope. They were tired, scarred by war, but alive. The first true family of gods. Zeus turned to them. "The Titans are fallen," he said, his voice steady but low. "The world is ours to guard, but who among us can claim to rule it?" Poseidon's trident struck the ground, sending ripples through the stone. "We fought together, brother. Let us rule together." Hades's gaze lifted from the shadows. "There can be no peace in shared crowns," he said. Every kingdom needs its keeper. Zeus nodded. Then we will divide the realms not by desire but by chance. Let fate decide where each of us belongs. He tore a strip of the sky itself, shaping it into 3 lots. Each god reached forward, their hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of eternity pressing down. When they opened their palms, the fates were sealed. Zeus had drawn the heavens, the endless vault above, the realm of storm and cloud. Poseidon, the sea, ever-changing, boundless, and deep. And Hades, the underworld, silent, unseen, yet vital as breath. The earth itself would remain neutral, shared among them all. It was balance, fragile but divine. And so began the building of a new world. On the ashes of Mount Othrys, the gods raised Mount Olympus, a citadel that pierced the clouds, built not from stone but from will. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom, forged its foundations in gold and silver. Rivers of light ran through its walls. The Centimanes lifted its pillars into the sky, each taller than a mountain. When it was finished, Olympus shone brighter than any star. Zeus took his throne at its center, carved from crystal and storm cloud. Above it, lightning coiled like living veins of fire. To his right sat Hera, crowned in peacock feathers, her gaze serene but sharp. Poseidon's trident rested near the reflecting pools, while Hades lingered at the edge of the great hall, his eyes fixed on the unseen horizon below. From that high mountain, the world stretched out before them, the sea glimmering like liquid glass, forests reborn, the wind carrying the first songs of peace. Mortals began to rise again from the earth, timid and curious, looking to the sky for guidance. They built fires in honor of the unseen powers above, and the gods, new to worship, listened in wonder. Olympus became not only a home but an idea. It was order where there had been chaos, justice where there had been fear. Yet even in paradise, shadows lingered. Zeus would sometimes walk alone along the marble corridors, feeling the hum of the clouds beneath his feet. He would look down upon the world and wonder if he had truly broken the cycle his father warned him of, or if he had merely reshaped it. One evening, Hades came to him quietly. "The Titans are sealed," he said, "but their whispers still rise from Tartarus. They dream of vengeance." Zeus looked toward the horizon, where the sun melted into the sea. "Then let them dream. Dreams cannot break chains." But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Even gods are haunted by what they bury. Days turned to years, years into centuries. The world healed, and Olympus became the pulse of creation. The seasons began their endless dance, Demeter guiding growth, Poseidon stirring the tides, Hades watching over the departed. And Zeus, from his throne, maintained balance through thunder and mercy alike. Yet sometimes, when lightning illuminated the night sky, the faint shape of chains could be seen flickering in the clouds, reminders of the Titans' fall. The war was over, but history never truly ends. It only sleeps, waiting for memory to stir. One evening, as Hera joined Zeus on the terrace overlooking the mortal world, she spoke softly. "You've given peace to the earth. Do you think it will last?" Zeus watched the horizon, where storms brewed in distant silence. "Peace," he said, "is not a gift, it's a flame, and every flame must be watched." The thunder rolled gently, not as a warning, but as a heartbeat. Olympus breathed. The gods had found their home. The world had found its order. For now, at least, can harmony exist where ambition still breathes? The clouds above Olympus drifted like slow-moving continents. The air shimmered with the hum of new divinity, the kind that follows the end of chaos. From his throne of stormlight, Zeus gazed out over creation. The world had survived. The Titans were gone, the earth reborn, and silence had finally returned. Yet peace, Zeus was beginning to understand, was not absence of noise. It was the quiet before the next storm. Though Olympus stood tall, the universe itself remained unsettled. The war had broken the very laws of balance. The seas rose unpredictably. The winds howled with strange voices. The underworld churned restlessly beneath its surface. Even the stars, once steady, now pulsed with nervous light. Zeus called for his brothers. Poseidon arrived first, carrying with him the scent of salt and thunder. His armor still shimmered with sea foam, his trident humming faintly as though it too breathed. Hades followed, silent and shadow-cloaked, his eyes dark as the spaces between stars. They stood before Zeus beneath the glowing dome of Olympus. For a moment, none spoke. They didn't need to. The air between them was heavy with unspoken truth. The world they had saved was still unclaimed. Finally, Poseidon broke the silence. "Brother, the sea does not rest. It calls to me endlessly. The tides rise without master. The storms wander without order. The ocean needs a hand to guide it." Zeus nodded. "And you would be that hand?" Poseidon's voice deepened. "Who else knows its fury as I do? It is in my blood, as lightning is in yours." Hades stepped forward then, his presence dimming the light of the hall. "And what of the realm beneath? The dead stir without peace. Their shadows wander the earth. Someone must bring them rest. Someone must guard the border between what breathes and what doesn't." Zeus turned his gaze toward him, thoughtful. "And would you dwell there willingly, brother?" A faint smile crossed Hades's lips, neither bitter nor kind. "Someone must. Not all thrones are meant for sunlight." The decision weighed on Zeus like the sky itself. They had fought side by side, bled together, defied fate together, and now they would divide eternity. But even gods cannot share everything. So Zeus summoned the Fates, the three sisters who spin and measure all destinies. They arrived cloaked in twilight, their eyes blind yet all-seeing. Before them, Zeus placed 3 tokens, each a piece of the new cosmos. A shard of cloud, a drop of sea, and a stone from the underworld. "Let the lot be drawn," Zeus said, "and let chance, not pride, choose our realms." The first fate reached into the bowl and drew forth the shard of cloud. "To the youngest, the sky," she whispered, "to rule the storms, the winds, and the light of heaven." The second fate drew the drop of sea. "To the middle-born, the oceans and rivers, the endless tides and their secrets." The final fate lifted the stone. "And to the eldest, the unseen world, where rest and silence reign eternal." The decision was made. Zeus claimed the heavens, the domain of lightning, justice, and command. Poseidon took the seas, restless and deep. Hades accepted the underworld, a kingdom of memory and shadow. The earth itself would remain unclaimed, shared by all, a meeting ground between heaven, sea, and death. The brothers clasped forearms, sealing their covenant in thunder. Yet beneath the unity, something else lingered. Envy, distance, a faint awareness that even blood ties cannot silence destiny's whisper. In the centuries that followed, the world found its rhythm once more. The storms began to move with purpose. The oceans obeyed the pull of moonlight. The dead settled into quiet procession. From Olympus, Zeus ruled as the overseer of all, his lightning both protector and judge. Poseidon carved palaces from coral and pearl, creating realms that shimmered beneath the waves. And Hades, in his solemn solitude, built a kingdom of silence, neither cruel nor kind, but absolute. Yet even in balance, tension brewed. The sea grew jealous of the sky's endless freedom. The underworld resented the laughter of the living. And the sky, for all its grandeur, feared its own isolation. One evening, Zeus looked down upon the mortal world and saw a reflection of the same conflict within them. Greed, rivalry, longing for power. Perhaps, he thought, even the divine cannot escape the flaws of its creation. Still, he ruled with measured hand. He established laws for gods and mortals alike, binding oaths sworn upon the river Styx, the sacred flame of Hestia burning as witness. He created order where chaos once reigned, knowing full well that order, too, can become its own kind of tyranny. On the shores below, mortals began to build temples of marble and stone, offering prayers to the unseen sky. They called him Zeus Xenios, protector of guests, Zeus Horkios, keeper of oaths, Zeus Basilius, king of gods. Every name was a crown, and every crown a burden. From Olympus, the thunder rolled, not in anger, but as a reminder. Balance demanded vigilance. One night, Hera stood beside Zeus, her eyes tracing the constellations newly arranged across the heavens. "You've divided the world," she said softly, "but have you divided peace?" Zeus looked toward the sea, where storms moved in restless sleep, and to the horizon, where darkness curled beneath the earth. "No," he said, "peace cannot be divided. It must be guarded. Every moment, every breath." A flash of lightning crossed the sky, not fierce, but patient. The heavens exhaled. The world had found balance, however fragile. But balance, like power, always demands a price. Is balance ever more than a pause between storms? The world at last had settled. The seas pulsed in rhythm with Poseidon's trident. The underworld breathed quietly beneath Hades' rule, and the sky thrummed with Zeus's steady watch. But for all its beauty, the earth was empty of meaning. Mountains stood proud, forests whispered secrets, rivers ran endless, and yet no voice answered them. It was Prometheus, the titan who had sided with Zeus during the Great War, who first spoke what even the gods had begun to feel. He stood upon the edge of Olympus, gazing down at the silent plains below. "The world is perfect," he said, "and yet it does not know it." Zeus, seated upon his throne of cloud, regarded him curiously. "What do you mean?" Prometheus turned, his eyes bright with a dangerous kind of compassion. "You've built a kingdom of order, but there is no one to praise it. The stars burn, but none admire them. The sea sings, but none listen. The earth yearns for witnesses, my king." Zeus's gaze drifted downward. "And what would you make of such witnesses?" "Not gods," Prometheus replied, "but something between heaven and soil. Fragile, curious, capable of choice. They will worship, yes, but they will also dream." Dream. It was a word that unsettled even Zeus. For dreams, he knew, had birthed both creation and rebellion. Still, curiosity overcame caution. "And how would you shape such a being?" Prometheus smiled faintly, "With clay and longing." And so he descended to the earth. On the plains where sunlight met shadow, Prometheus gathered clay from the banks of a sacred river. His fingers molded it with the precision of a sculptor and the tenderness of a father. He shaped bodies tall and small, gave them hands that could build, eyes that could weep, hearts that could hope. From the breath of the wind, he gave them voice. From the warmth of the earth, he gave them life. When he was finished, they stirred. They opened their eyes and looked at the world, not with the detachment of gods, but with awe. They marveled at the sky, at the sea, at themselves. Their laughter carried through the valleys like new music, and even the mountains seemed to lean closer to listen. Zeus watched from above, thoughtful. "You've given them curiosity," he said, "but you've also given them hunger. What happens when they desire too much?" Prometheus bowed his head. "Then they will learn, as all beings must, that every gift is also a test." First Zeus was pleased. The mortals built temples and offered prayers to the unseen heavens. Their songs rose like smoke, filling Olympus with melody. But soon he noticed something troubling. They feared the cold. They trembled in the dark. Their fragile bodies shivered through long nights. They were alive, yes, but helpless. Prometheus saw their suffering and could not bear it. "They need warmth," he said. "Let them endure," Zeus answered. "Suffering teaches reverence." But Prometheus knew reverence born of fear was no virtue, and so he defied the king of gods. Under the veil of night, he climbed Mount Olympus. The air crackled with power. Lightning danced across the clouds, but he moved swiftly, silently. Near the forge of the Cyclopes, he found the ember of eternal flame, the fire that burned only for the gods. With hands that trembled not from fear, but purpose, he took it. A single spark, wrapped in fennel stalk, hidden from the watch of Zeus. He carried it down the mountain and placed it in mortal hands. The flame flared to life, illuminating their faces. For the first time, darkness had an answer. They cooked, they forged, they built. The world glowed with the light of rebellion disguised as hope. When Zeus awoke and saw fire flickering across the earth, his rage thundered through the heavens. He has stolen what was never meant to leave Olympus. The sky split with fury. Lightning struck the mountains where Prometheus stood, but the Titan did not run. He faced the storm and bowed his head. I gave them not power, he said, but potential. Yet Zeus's anger was not easily cooled. You have undone the distance between gods and men. You have made them think themselves divine. Prometheus's reply was soft. Perhaps, my king, that was always your fear. Zeus's silence was heavier than thunder. He could not unmake what had been given. The fire was now part of the world. But he could make an example of its giver. That punishment would come soon, in whispers carried by wind and storm. For now, Zeus only turned from the sight of the glowing earth, troubled by something he could not name. Down below, mortals looked up at the sky and felt warmth upon their faces, never knowing the cost of their miracle. They began to tell stories of the Titan who pitted them, of the god who ruled the storms, of the fragile line between divine wrath and mercy. From their hands came creation, from their hearts came worship, and from their mistakes would come all that followed. The gods had given them life, but with that gift came the one thing even gods feared most: freedom. What happens when creation begins to mirror its creator? Fire flickered across the mortal world like stolen sunlight. Villages that had once cowered in darkness now glowed with life. The flame danced in their hands, a gift they didn't understand, a spark of Olympus resting in mortal palms. They built tools, shaped metal, and warmed their cold nights. For the first time, humankind looked up at the heavens not with fear, but with gratitude. But Zeus did not see gratitude. He saw defiance. From his throne above the clouds, he watched the earth burn golden below. The sight was beautiful, yes, but beauty born of disobedience is a dangerous thing. The god of thunder felt a rare emotion stirring in his chest. Unease. This was not meant for them, he said quietly. Fire is the heart of divinity. They will use it and forget who gave it. Hera, seated beside him, tilted her head. Or perhaps they will remember Prometheus instead. Her words stung more than lightning. Zeus rose, thunderclouds gathering behind his eyes. Then they will also remember the cost of theft. Below, Prometheus stood upon a mountainside, watching mortals kindle their first fires. He smiled faintly, the warmth reflected in his gaze. But he knew what was coming. The wind had already begun to shift. The air trembled with divine anger. The sky split open. Zeus descended in a column of light, his presence shaking the mountain. The mortals fled in terror, their fires sputtering as rain poured down. Prometheus stood tall, his cloak whipping in the storm. You've undone the order of the world, Zeus thundered. You've given them what was never theirs. Prometheus bowed his head, unashamed. I gave them what was needed. You built a world of gods but forgot the hearts that would fill it. They needed warmth, not worship. Zeus's eyes burned. You think yourself wise? You think mercy grants you virtue? You are a Titan still, bound to rebellion by blood. And you, Prometheus answered softly, are bound by fear. For a moment, neither moved. The storm itself seemed to wait. Then Zeus raised his hand. Chains of lightning coiled around Prometheus, binding him where he stood. The ground split open, and the god of thunder cast him down into the shadowed valleys of the Caucasus Mountains, a prison carved from the bones of the earth. There, the chains became living metal fusing with stone. The mountains swallowed his limbs, holding him immovable beneath the open sky. Zeus's voice echoed above him. You gave them fire, then let fire be your torment. From the darkness swooped an eagle vast as a storm cloud, its wings blotting out the sun. Its eyes glowed gold, its beak glimmered like molten bronze. It landed upon the bound Titan and tore into his flesh, ripping free his immortal liver. Prometheus did not die, he could not. Each night his body healed. Each dawn, the eagle returned. His screams became part of the wind, his endurance a lesson that outlived empires. Yet even in agony, Prometheus did not curse the mortals he had saved. Sometimes, when night fell and the stars flickered overhead, he would smile faintly. "They have light," he would whisper, "and that is enough." In Olympus, Zeus watched, unblinking. The punishment was not cruelty, it was law, or so he told himself. But beneath his certainty lingered a question he refused to name. Hades, visiting from the underworld, found him alone one evening. "You look troubled, brother," he said quietly. Zeus's gaze did not leave the storm. "He defied me. He broke divine law." "Perhaps," Hades said, "or perhaps he revealed the flaw in it." Zeus frowned. Meaning, Hades continued, "that you rule through order. But order without compassion is another kind of chaos." The god of thunder turned away, unwilling to answer. Hades left him to his silence. Meanwhile, the mortals grew. They tamed beasts, forged tools, built altars to both gods and titans. Some whispered prayers to Prometheus, the chained benefactor, the suffering savior. Others feared Zeus's storms and built temples to appease his wrath. Faith had been born, and with it, the fragile bond between creation and creator. But faith, Zeus knew, is never permanent. Mortals forget. They question. And once they question, they change. So the king of gods devised another plan. If Prometheus had given fire as a gift, Zeus would give a gift of his own, one that mortals would never forget. Not a blessing, but a test disguised as beauty. He called upon Hephaestus, the divine smith, and commanded him to shape a being unlike any other. "Make her flawless," Zeus said, "a mirror to mortal desire." And so, from ivory and divine breath, the first woman took form. She would be named Pandora, the bearer of all gifts. But her true purpose had yet to unfold. For now, Prometheus suffered in silence, his blood feeding the earth below. From his torment grew the red flowers of resilience, blooming along the cliffs that held him captive. Even bound, his defiance changed the world. And in Olympus, Zeus looked down upon those flowers and thought, not with pride, but with unease. For the flame Prometheus had given to humankind now burned quietly within their souls, could never be taken back. Can compassion survive when obedience is broken? The fire Prometheus gave to mankind still glowed across the earth, flickering in hearths, forges, and hearts. From Olympus, Zeus watched its steady burn with an expression neither rage nor admiration could fully define. Fire had given humans warmth, but also ambition. They now built monuments, shaped metal into weapons, and whispered prayers not out of fear, but with pride. It was not the flame itself that unsettled Zeus. It was what it awakened. Mortals had begun to question, to seek, to imagine they could rival even the gods. That arrogance, Zeus decided, could not go unanswered. He turned to Hephaestus, the divine smith, whose hands forged both creation and punishment. "Make something new," Zeus commanded. "Something beautiful, something irresistible." Hephaestus bowed, his eyes glowing from the fire within his forge. From earth and water he molded the shape of a woman. Her skin shimmered like polished ivory. Her eyes glowed blue as a newborn sky. Every movement was grace, every breath perfection. But she was not alive, yet Zeus called upon the goddesses to complete her. Aphrodite blessed her with beauty so radiant it could halt a heartbeat. Athena gave her cunning and skill. Hermes, sly as ever, slipped into her heart the gift of persuasion and deceit. Hera adorned her with curiosity, the kind that would one day open doors that should have remained sealed. When all was finished, Hephaestus breathed life into her, and she opened her eyes. The gods named her Pandora, meaning all-gifted. She smiled, and Olympus itself seemed to pause. Even Zeus felt the faint pull of admiration, and that was precisely the danger he had intended to create. He took her by the hand and presented her to Epimetheus, brother of Prometheus. "Take her," Zeus said softly, "a gift from Olympus to mankind." Epimetheus hesitated. His brother's voice still echoed in his memory. Never accept gifts from the gods. But one look at Pandora and reason melted away. Her laughter, her warmth, her presence. It all felt like light. And so he accepted her, unaware that she carried more than beauty. For in her hands, Pandora held a jar smooth, golden, sealed with divine wax. It was said to contain blessings for humanity, though none had told her what those blessings were. The gods smiled as she descended to earth, the jar glimmering in her arms. Days passed. Pandora lived among mortals, her wonder for the world genuine. She touched flowers as though each were a miracle, listened to rivers like music, laughed at the flicker of flame Prometheus had stolen. But beneath her joy stirred the faintest ache, the weight of not knowing. What was in the jar? Every whisper of wind, every gleam of light on its surface seemed to call her name. Curiosity, once a gift, grew teeth. At night, she would run her fingers along the seal, tracing its warmth. Just a glance, she whispered to herself. A glimpse can do no harm. And one dawn, when the world was silent and Epimetheus slept beside her, she gave in. The lid cracked, the air screamed. From within the jar burst shadows, writhing, shrieking, filling the sky with chaos. Sickness, envy, grief, famine. All the sorrows that had never before existed rushed into the world. The sun dimmed, rivers turned bitter. The laughter of humankind was replaced by cries of despair. Pandora stumbled back, horrified. "What have I done?" she gasped. She tried to close the jar, but the forces within it clawed against her hands. Desperate to escape, she fell to her knees, sobbing. Then, faintly, she heard something, a whisper, not sharp like the others, but soft, gentle, pleading. "Don't shut me out," it said. Pandora hesitated, for within the jar, beneath the screams and curses, one light still flickered. She leaned close and saw it, a single glow, fragile but unwavering. It was hope. With trembling hands, Pandora sealed the jar once more, trapping that final light inside. The world was scarred, but not condemned. For even amidst suffering, the memory of hope would remain. When Zeus looked down upon the scene, Hera approached him. "You've filled the world with pain," she said. "Will you leave them no mercy?" Zeus's eyes followed the mortal woman, kneeling in tears beside the jar. "Mercy," he murmured. "I left them the only one that matters." He turned away, the storm behind his eyes fading. He had not created Pandora to destroy mankind, but to test them. For through her mistake, mortals had been given the one gift that even gods envy, the power to endure. Epimetheus awoke and found Pandora weeping beside him. He touched her shoulder gently. "The world has changed," he said quietly. Pandora nodded. "Because of me." "No," he said, "because of us." Together they stepped outside. The land was wounded but alive. Birds still sang, though their songs carried sorrow. The sun rose, dimmer yet steadfast. Humanity, bruised but breathing, began again. In Olympus, the gods watched in silence. Prometheus's fire still burned below. Pandora's shadow still lingered. Between the two, between rebellion and mistake, humanity had been born. And Zeus, high upon his throne, finally understood. To be mortal was to live between extremes. Light and shadow, faith and doubt, destruction and renewal. It was a balance even gods struggled to keep. He raised his hand, and the thunder rolled, not as wrath, but as remembrance. Below, the woman who had opened the jar whispered a prayer. Not to beg, but to promise. She would guard what remained within. Was hope a mercy, or another illusion? Lightning crowned the sky, but it no longer burned with rage. The war was long over. The Titans lay buried beneath the earth. The seas obeyed their master, and mortals prayed beneath open skies. Olympus, radiant, ordered, eternal, had become the heart of the world. From his throne of living cloud, Zeus ruled not merely as a conqueror, but as the arbiter between heaven and earth. He was no longer the hidden child in a cave, no longer the rebel with lightning in his hands. He was a king, the king. But kingship, even divine, is a double-edged crown. At dawn, Zeus would stand upon the balcony of Olympus and watch the mortal world awaken. Smoke rose from their fires, rivers gleamed like veins of light, and the faint sound of prayer drifted upward. 1,000 voices whispering his name. He listened with pride and with unease. For every prayer of gratitude, there were 10 of desperation. For every plea for mercy, there was a curse whispered in secret. The mortals he ruled were mirrors, reflecting both devotion and defiance. And Zeus began to realize that power, when worshipped, becomes a kind of loneliness. Still, he ruled with precision. His thunderbolt became not a weapon, but a symbol of law. When oaths were broken, storms followed. When justice was denied, lightning struck. He created the order that gods and men would follow alike. The laws of hospitality, of honor, of truth. To lie under Zeus's sky was to invite ruin. To live with integrity was to live beneath his protection. The Olympian court thrived. Hera, his queen, stood beside him, regal and unyielding. Poseidon ruled the seas with restless pride, Hades the underworld with solemn calm. Athena, born not of desire, but of thought, stood as his voice of wisdom. The air above Olympus shimmered with harmony, and yet, beneath that golden order, something restless stirred. It began with whispers. Some gods called Zeus just, others tyrant. His will was law, and law, even divine, is often resented. Hera grew weary of his distant gaze, suspecting not wisdom, but wandering. Poseidon envied the sky's vastness. Hades envied the sky's light. Even among gods, envy grows like ivy, slow, silent, and inevitable. One evening, as thunder slept and the stars glimmered softly, Zeus sat alone in his great hall. Before him burned the sacred flame of Hestia, the heart of Olympus. Its warmth reminded him of Amalthea's cave, of the days when his power had not yet become responsibility. Athena entered quietly. "You stare at the fire as if it might speak." Zeus smiled faintly. "It already has. It says everything that burns must also guard what it consumes." Athena studied him. "You are troubled. Every ruler is," he said. "When I was a child, I believed lightning meant control. Now I see it only means consequence." Athena tilted her head. "And yet, consequence is the truest form of justice." Zeus's gaze drifted to the clouds beyond. "Justice," he murmured, "or balance. I am not sure they are the same." The next morning, he descended to the mortal world in disguise. He walked among shepherds and kings, beggars and poets. He saw cruelty disguised as piety, kindness hidden beneath silence. He saw love that defied law, and greed that flourished under worship. The world was imperfect and yet alive. In a small village, he watched a woman share her last loaf of bread with a stranger. No temples, no prayers, only compassion. When lightning flashed across the distant hills, Zeus realized something. Power does not sustain creation. Empathy does. That night, he returned to Olympus changed. He spoke to the gods gathered in the great hall. "We are not loved because we are feared," he said. "We are remembered because we endure with those who suffer." Hera looked at him, her expression unreadable. "And yet, you punish rebellion with storms." "Because rebellion without purpose destroys," Zeus answered. "But mercy without judgment invites ruin. The world needs both." The hall fell silent. Even Poseidon, ever defiant, found no words. The flame of Hestia burned steadier than before. From that day forward, Zeus ruled differently. He was still the thunder, still the storm, but also the calm after it. He punished deceit, yes, but he rewarded honesty even more. He granted mortals the seasons, the promise that even after death, life would return. He visited the peaks of Olympus less and the world below more. Sometimes, in the form of a white eagle, he would soar over fields and cities, unseen, listening to songs sung in his name and the arguments shouted against him. Both, he realized, were prayers. And yet, even as balance returned, shadows lingered. For order, once established, must always face its greatest enemy, complacency. The other gods began to test their boundaries. Desire crept back into Olympus. Curiosity tempted the divine just as it once had Pandora. Zeus could feel it, the faint crack in perfection, the hum of unrest that precedes every new story. Still, he stood watch. From his throne, he gazed down upon mortals tending their fires, the same flame Prometheus had stolen, still glowing after all these ages. He smiled. They build, they love, they defy. Perhaps that is what it means to rule, not to command, but to witness. Outside, thunder murmured across the horizon. Not in warning, but in rhythm, like the slow beating heart of eternity. The Stormbringer had become the balance keeper. The child of rebellion had become the guardian of order. Yet even as peace stretched across the world, one question echoed softly in the wind, unanswered and eternal. Does the ruler ever escape the ghost of the throne? The dawn over Olympus was soft that day, golden light spilling through mist like liquid wisdom. The air shimmered with quiet expectancy, as if even the clouds knew something sacred was about to unfold. For weeks, Zeus had been restless. His dreams were filled with strange visions, labyrinths of thought, flashes of battle, voices whispering counsel and prophecy. When he awoke, a pain like fire throbbed inside his skull. No god could ease it, no healer could touch it. It was as if lightning itself had turned inward, seeking escape. The other gods watched with unease. Hera paced the marble halls, her eyes sharp with suspicion. "He hides something," she murmured. "A secret even from me." Poseidon frowned. "Zeus hides nothing. He is the secret." But Athena, though not yet born, was already near. On the seventh day, the pain grew unbearable. Zeus staggered from his throne, clutching his head. Thunder rolled through the sky, though he had not called it. Bolts of light tore across Olympus, shattering columns, splitting the air. The gods fled the hall, fearing what storm might emerge from their king. Only Hephaestus, the divine smith, remained. He approached cautiously, hammer in hand. "Father of gods," he said, voice steady. "Give the word, and I will end your pain." Through clenched teeth, Zeus nodded. Hephaestus lifted his hammer, its head glowing white-hot. With one precise strike, he brought it down upon Zeus's skull. The sound was not of breaking bone, but of 1,000 ideas shattering into form. Light exploded from the wound, blinding, pure, endless. From it stepped Athena, fully grown, clad in shining armor, her eyes the color of dawn after rain. In her hand was a spear. Upon her arm, a shield engraved with the symbols of wisdom and war. She did not cry, nor stumble, nor fear. She simply was. The storm ceased instantly. The air grew calm. The gods who had fled returned, awe spreading across their faces. Hera froze, her lips parting in silent disbelief. "Born from his head," she whispered. "Without mother, without pain." Athena turned to her father. "You called for wisdom," she said, her voice steady as wind through olive leaves. "Now she stands before you." Zeus, still kneeling, looked up at her. The pain was gone. In its place was clarity, the same calm he had sought since the first war. He rose and touched her cheek, a rare gentleness in his storm-forged hands. "Daughter," he said, "you are both my thought and my peace." Athena bowed. "Then may your peace guide those who think before they strike." In that moment, Olympus changed forever. A new kind of power had entered its golden halls, not the fury of the sea, nor the silence of the underworld, nor the passion of love, but reason. Athena's presence was a mirror to Zeus himself, a mind unclouded by desire, untouched by fear. She became his counselor, his strategist, his balance. When gods quarreled, she calmed them. When mortals cried for guidance, she whispered invention into their dreams. She taught them to weave, to build, to seek victory not through destruction, but through understanding. And yet, even wisdom can cause unease. Ares, god of war, sneered at her. "You speak of battle, but know nothing of blood." Athena replied softly, "And you speak of blood, but know nothing of victory." Their rivalry was born that day, war and wisdom locked in eternal contest. For Ares fought for dominance, Athena, for order. Each represented a side of Zeus's own nature, power and restraint. As centuries passed, Athena became beloved of mortals. Cities rose in her name. Temples crowned with olive branches lined the hills. The people prayed not for conquest, but for insight. They called her Pallas Athena, the unshaken one, and built for her the shining city of Athens, where thought itself would one day rule the world. From Olympus, Zeus watched with pride and quiet dread. Pride, because his daughter's wisdom spread harmony across the mortal realm. Dread, because even wisdom carries rebellion in its heart. One evening, as the stars burned soft above Olympus, Zeus called Athena to him. "You are my mind made flesh," he said. "But tell me, daughter, can reason rule where emotion breathes?" Athena looked out across the heavens. "Reason can rule, father," she said, "but only when emotion is heard." Zeus studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Then perhaps you are the true balance I could never be." Athena bowed, but her eyes held the depth of prophecy. "Even balance, father, can fall." Her words lingered long after she departed. Zeus turned his gaze to the mortal world below. Fires glowed softly in the distance. The same flames Prometheus had stolen ages ago, now tended by thoughtful hands. Wisdom had been born not from battle, but from pain. From the mind of a god had come the light of understanding, and for the first time, Zeus understood his own paradox: to rule through both storm and silence, command and compassion. Above Olympus, the wind carried a sound not of thunder, but of turning pages, the quiet rustle of knowledge beginning to spread. Can intellect ever be contained by power, or must it always seek to teach it? Olympus gleamed brighter than ever before. The wars were over, the laws were written, and the throne of Zeus stood unchallenged. Yet, for all his power, the king of gods found himself haunted not by enemies, but by longing. Immortality offers many gifts, but peace of the heart is rarely one of them. For Zeus, the ruler of the skies, love became both his solace and his curse. It began innocently, an admiration here, a spark of fascination there. Hera, his queen, was radiant beyond measure, her presence commanding and graceful. She embodied everything Zeus believed in: order, loyalty, and divine dignity. But where lightning exists, thunder follows, and Zeus's nature was never still. The first time Hera caught his wandering gaze upon another, Olympus itself trembled. "You are the sky," she hissed, "yet you cannot remain in one place." Zeus tried to reason, his voice soft as distant rain. "The sky moves not from desire, but from duty. It touches all because it must." Hera's eyes flashed. "And duty now wears the face of mortal women?" The air crackled between them, lightning and storm in perfect opposition. From that tension, the myths of jealousy and love began to weave their endless thread. Zeus's liaisons would become legend. Each love, mortal or divine, left its mark upon history, upon the world itself. There was Io, the priestess of Hera, whose beauty glowed like silver dawn. When Hera's suspicion turned toward her, Zeus panicked and transformed Io into a white cow to hide her. But Hera, cunning as ever, demanded the creature as a gift. Under her gaze, Io was guarded by Argus, a giant with 100 eyes. Zeus sent Hermes, the trickster, to free her, lulling Argus to sleep with his lyre before striking him down. When Hera found the body, she took Argus's eyes and placed them on the feathers of her sacred bird, the peacock, so that even in death, her vigilance would never fade. Then there was Leto, gentle and patient, beloved by Zeus. When she became pregnant with his twins, Hera cast her from Olympus, forbidding any land under the sun to give her refuge. But the island of Delos, a floating piece of earth, offered sanctuary. There, under whispering palms, Leto gave birth to Apollo and Artemis, light and moon incarnate. The music of their birth filled the heavens, softening even Hera's wrath for a moment. And Semele, a mortal princess, whose heart beat with pure devotion. Hera, veiled in disguise, whispered poison into her thoughts. "If Zeus truly loves you," she said, "ask to see him in his divine form." Semele obeyed, and in doing so sealed her fate. No mortal could bear the sight of unfiltered godhood. The moment Zeus revealed himself, his lightning consumed her. From her ashes, however, rose Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy, the child of destruction and rebirth. Each love brought creation but also consequence. From Europa, Zeus's passion birthed kings. From Danae he fathered heroes. Yet each union deepened the rift between him and Hera. In Olympus, the tension grew palpable. Hera's jealousy was not blind rage. It was wounded pride. "You give them your attention," she told Zeus one night, "and I must give them your punishment." He stared into the storm beyond the clouds. "You are not my punishment, Hera," he said quietly. "You are my balance." She turned away, but her silence was sharper than any storm. The other gods spoke in whispers. "When the heavens quarrel," Poseidon said, "the seas drown." Yet even he knew that the thunder of their love was part of what made Olympus live. For without jealousy, there is no devotion. Without desire, no creation. Zeus's affairs were not mere indulgence. They were myths in motion, reflections of the divine impulse to create, to connect, to shape. Each story carried both light and lesson. His love gave the world its heroes and monsters, its triumphs and tragedies. Still, Hera's fury was relentless. She cursed the women he loved and the children they bore. Yet beneath her wrath was heartbreak too vast for eternity to heal. The poets would one day write of her as vengeful, but the truth was deeper. Hers was the pain of a goddess who had given her eternity to a god who could never stay still. There were nights, however, when even jealousy slept. On those nights, Zeus and Hera would walk the marble terraces of Olympus together, looking down upon the mortal world. The storms would calm, the stars would hum softly, and for a few fleeting hours, king and queen stood side by side, not as rulers, but as beings who simply existed. One such night, Hera broke the silence. "Do you ever tire of them?" she asked. "The mortals you chase, the children you scatter like seeds?" Zeus exhaled, watching a distant lightning flicker over the sea.
No.
"Because in them, I see us, imperfect, passionate, alive." Hera looked at him, and for once, there was no anger in her eyes, only understanding. "Then perhaps," she said, "that is why you will never find peace." The dawn rose slowly, brushing the clouds in gold. Hera walked away first, her robes whispering like waves. Zeus remained behind, the wind playing gently through his hair. From far below, he could hear the songs of mortals, prayers to Hera for love, to himself for strength. It struck him that they prayed to both, not knowing that love and strength are the same battle, fought endlessly between thunder and patience. He smiled, though the smile carried sorrow. "They worship us," he murmured, "but they will never understand that we are only reflections of their own hearts." The thunder rolled softly, like laughter beneath tears. Is love divine, or simply another form of conquest? There is a saying whispered even among the immortals: when Hera grows silent, the sky should fear her more than when she speaks. After centuries of watching Zeus scatter his love across heaven and earth, Hera's silence had become deafening. No thunder answered her grief now. No storm revealed her anger. Instead, her fury crystallized into patience, the most dangerous weapon of all. She had loved him once, more deeply than the poets could ever describe. Before the wars, before Olympus rose, before the crown of lightning. She remembered when Zeus had wooed her as a cuckoo seeking warmth from the cold. She had sheltered him in her hands, unaware that the trembling bird was a god in disguise. When she realized who he was, she had laughed, and that laughter became the sound of spring. He made her his queen, the highest among goddesses. But love that begins with laughter often ends in thunder. Every betrayal carved a mark upon her heart, and by now, that heart was marble. Hera no longer screamed. She planned. Her wrath did not roar. It rippled. It seeped into the fates of mortals, into the destinies of Zeus's offspring. She could not strike him directly, No god could challenge the king of Olympus and survive, but she could wound him through what he loved. The first to feel her vengeance was Io, once a priestess of Hera herself. The memory of that white cow still haunted the queen's dreams. How Zeus had turned the girl into a creature to hide his guilt. Hera had placed Argus to guard her, and even after Hermes killed the giant, Hera's punishment was not done. She sent a gadfly to sting Io endlessly, driving her across continents. The girl wandered through deserts and seas until at last she reached Egypt, where the sting ceased. There, Io's tears turned to rivers, and her descendants would bear both the sorrow and strength of her endurance. Next came Semele, the mortal who had dared to see Zeus's true form. Hera had appeared to her disguised as an old woman, whispering, "If he loves you, let him reveal himself." Semele obeyed, and her body turned to ash in divine fire. Yet Hera's triumph was not total. Zeus had saved their unborn child, stitching him into his own thigh until he was born as Dionysus. The god of madness and ecstasy would later challenge Hera's dominion over loyalty and order, turning worship itself into a frenzy. The queen had sown punishment, but the harvest was chaos. And then came Heracles. Of all Zeus's mortal sons, Heracles, born of Alcmene, was the one Hera despised most. The child's cries echoed through Olympus like mockery. She sent serpents to his cradle, but the infant crushed them in his tiny hands, laughing as their bodies fell limp. Hera watched from the clouds, a strange fear tightening her chest. "This one will make the world remember him," she whispered. "Then let him earn it in pain." She cursed his life with endless trials. Madness struck him, forcing him to slay his own family. In grief, he sought redemption through the 12 labors, feats so impossible that even gods would hesitate. Yet each trial only made him stronger, his name brighter. Hera's punishment had forged the very hero she wished to destroy. Still, her wrath endured, for Hera's vengeance was never simple anger. It was the divine insistence that justice must exist, even if love must burn to make room for it. One night, as thunder murmured softly in the distance, Hera stood upon the edge of Olympus. Her peacocks circled her, their jeweled feathers glinting in moonlight. Below, the mortal world flickered with the light of fire, Prometheus's legacy still defying divine decree. Zeus approached from behind, his footsteps quiet on the marble. "You watch them often," he said. "Do you envy them or pity them?" Hera did not turn. "Neither. I learn from them." What lesson could mortals teach the Queen of Heaven? She faced him then, her eyes like polished bronze. That loyalty without respect becomes slavery, and that even love, when betrayed too often, becomes justice. For the first time in ages, Zeus faltered. "You call vengeance justice? I call balance divine," she replied. They stood in silence, two forces too equal to destroy one another, too entwined to ever separate. The storm around them simmered, unable to decide whether to rage or weep. Zeus reached out a hand, lightning flickering faintly along his skin. "Hera," he began, "you are my equal. No one else could stand beside me." Her expression softened, but only slightly. "Then perhaps you should have remembered that before seeking warmth elsewhere." He withdrew his hand. The thunder rolled again, lower now, like a sigh from the heavens themselves. Hera turned away, her silhouette framed by the glow of the mortal fires below. "Do you still love me?" he asked quietly. Her answer came like the strike of lightning itself, bright, immediate, and final. "Always. That is why I will never forgive you." Zeus said nothing. He understood. Immortals could not forget. They carried memory like armor, love like lightning, beautiful, deadly, and eternal. As Hera walked back into the golden halls of Olympus, her steps echoed softly, a sound both regal and tragic. She had been queen for millennia, but her true crown was not gold. It was endurance. The sky rumbled gently above, not with wrath but reverence. Hera's vengeance had become her power, her heartbreak her strength. The mortals below would remember her not as the scorned wife, but as the goddess who demanded that oaths mean something, even from the gods. Where does vengeance end? and justice begin. The age of Titans had fallen, the reign of gods had settled, and yet the world still needed something between heaven and earth. Something mortal enough to feel pain, but divine enough to defy it. From that need, a new kind of being was born, the hero. Zeus watched the world from Olympus, his gaze tracing the rise and fall of mortal kingdoms. The fire Prometheus had given them now burned bright, sometimes too bright. Men had learned courage, ambition, and war, yet they also learned awe. When they looked at the sky, they still whispered his name. Hera too watched, but her eyes were sharper. "You give them too much of yourself," she said one evening, as thunder rolled lazily across the horizon. "Each time you descend, the line between God and man fades." Zeus smiled faintly. "Perhaps it must fade. Mortals learn best from what resembles them, or from what destroys them," Hera countered. She was not wrong. For each time Zeus's lightning touched the world, something extraordinary and dangerous was born. The first great spark came from Perseus, son of Danae. His story began not in grandeur, but in fear. Danae's father, warned by prophecy that his grandson would be his doom, locked her in a bronze tower so no man could reach her. Yet Zeus came not as thunder, but as a shower of golden light that slipped through the cracks. From that light, Perseus was conceived, the first mortal touched directly by divine will. His life was a storm disguised as destiny. Sent to slay Medusa, whose gaze turned men to stone, Perseus carried Athena's shield and Hermes' winged sandals. The gods watched as he used cunning, not strength, to win, catching the reflection of the monster in polished bronze before striking. When he returned, holding Medusa's head high, Zeus saw in him the first glimmer of mortal courage shaped by divine reason. Then came Heracles, child of Zeus and Alcmene, a name whispered with equal parts awe and sorrow. His birth was Hera's torment, his life her vengeance. Yet through his pain he became something greater. When Hera sent serpents to his cradle, he strangled them with his bare hands. When madness drove him to tragedy, he sought redemption not in words, but in deeds. The 12 labors, each one breaking his body yet forging his legend. As he fought the Nemean lion, cleansed the Augean stables, and captured Cerberus from Hades itself, the gods watched with fascination. Hera's curse had created a being who could endure what even gods could not. Consequence. Zeus looked upon his son and whispered, "He suffers as we cannot. That is his strength." From Europa, who had once been stolen away across the sea upon the back of a white bull, came kings and conquerors. From Leda, whose heart Zeus had won disguised as a swan, came Helen, whose beauty would burn an entire city to ash. Every union between god and mortal left a scar or a miracle upon history, sometimes both. Each child of Zeus carried lightning in their blood, but none carried peace. They were symbols of divine interference, the price of immortality touching flesh. Some became saviors, others tyrants, but all changed the world. The mortals began to call them demigods, though that word never captured their truth. They were bridges between worlds, walking contradictions. They loved as humans did, yet bore destinies that crushed them like mountains. Their victories illuminated humankind. Their suffering reminded all that divine blood does not erase mortal fragility. From his throne, Zeus observed their struggles and triumphs. Each hero was a reflection, a fragment of himself scattered across time. Some sought justice, others sought glory, but all shared one thing, defiance. One night, as the constellations glittered above Olympus, Athena approached Zeus, her eyes reflecting both pride and caution. "They worship their heroes more than their gods," she said softly. "Is that not a danger?" Zeus leaned back, the faintest smile ghosting across his face. "It is a necessity." "How so?" "They must see that greatness is possible. Not perfection that belongs to us, but greatness born from struggle. The hero reminds them that even in weakness, there is divinity." Athena tilted her head. "And what do the heroes remind you of, father?" Zeus's gaze drifted to the horizon. "That even gods envy meaning." For in the endless expanse of his power, Zeus had begun to feel the emptiness of immortality. Mortals burned brightly, briefly, and then were gone. Their stories, however, lived on. To be remembered, he realized, was a form of eternity greater than Olympus itself. Meanwhile, in the mortal world, songs began to spread. The poets sang of courage and fate, of love and loss, of men who challenged monsters and dared the wrath of heaven. The name of Zeus echoed in every verse, not just as a god, but as the architect of their trials. His lightning was no longer merely destruction, it was illumination. Hera listened too, though bitterness still clung to her heart. Watching the mortals honor her husband's bastards pained her. Yet she could not deny the beauty of their tales. Heracles, despite his curse, had built temples in her honor, offering sacrifice not from fear, but from forgiveness. It was then that Hera began to see the quiet power of mortality, the ability to forgive what gods never could. In the centuries that followed, new heroes would rise. Theseus, Jason, Achilles, Odysseus, each one echoing the thunder that once shook the heavens. And though their names changed, their purpose did not. They were the threads that wove mortals to immortals, stories to eternity. Zeus sat upon Olympus, listening to those stories echo through time. He understood that his reign was not defined by the throne beneath him, but by the hearts that still looked upward in wonder. The gods may rule, he said quietly, but it is the heroes who keep the world alive. Below, torches flickered in the night. Songs rose into the wind, carrying names that would never fade. The age of gods had created the age of men, and men, in turn, had learned to create their own legends. Can divinity survive inside a human heart? Or is that where it truly begins? The songs of heroes had barely faded when the earth itself began to tremble once more. From the depths of Gaia, the mother of all, something ancient stirred. A force not of divine order, nor mortal rebellion, but pure, primal vengeance. The Titans had fallen. Their screams still echoed in the hollow of Tartarus. But Gaia, their mother, never forgave Zeus for casting her children into chains beneath the world. For years she endured his lightning, his laws, his proud order spread across heaven and earth. But patience, even in gods, has limits. Her sorrow curdled into rage. From that rage, she gave birth to new children, massive, monstrous beings with the strength of mountains and the fury of storms. Their bodies were forged from the bones of the earth itself, their hair a tangle of serpents, their eyes burning with molten fire. These were the giants born not to create but to destroy. When they rose, the world shuddered. Valleys split. Volcanoes ignited without warning. The sea boiled. Even Olympus felt the tremors as the mountain groaned under the weight of awakening vengeance. From her cavern deep below, Gaia's voice roared upward, shaking the heavens. Zeus, king of the unjust, you overthrew your father, chained your kin, and crowned yourself as balance. But balance built on fear is still tyranny. Zeus stood on his throne, thunder already forming around his hands. Mother of Titans, he called, his voice echoing across eternity. You mistake law for cruelty. I brought order where there was chaos. The earth answered with laughter, dark, thunderous laughter. Then meet your consequence. The ground split open. From the chasm rose the first of the giants. Alcyoneus, taller than mountains, his skin glowing like embers, his roar louder than thunder itself. Behind him followed Porphyrion, Enceladus, Mimas, and dozens more, each one carrying the fury of their mother. Olympus braced for war once again. Zeus summoned his siblings. Poseidon rose from the sea, trident gleaming. Hades emerged from the shadows, his helm drawing silence wherever he walked. Athena armed herself in bronze, calm but ready. Even Hera, whose heart still simmered with jealousy, stood beside her husband. For in this war, even vengeance bowed to survival. The Gigantomachy, the war of the giants, had begun. The battlefield stretched across Greece, fields of fire and shattered stone. The giants hurled mountains as weapons, tearing peaks from the earth and flinging them like stones. The gods struck back with divine fire, the sky flashing like 1,000 suns. Mortals looked up in terror, believing the world was ending. and in a way it was. Zeus's thunderbolts carved craters into the ground. Poseidon raised tsunamis that swallowed legions whole. Hades sent shadows that clawed at the giants' feet, pulling them toward Tartarus. Yet for every fallen monster, two more rose in its place. Then came Porphyrion, the mightiest of them all, surging toward Olympus itself. His eyes blazed with fury as he shouted, "You are no king, Zeus. You are a thief of crowns." He seized Hera in his massive hand, his strength shaking the very foundations of the mountain. Zeus roared, lightning bursting from his body in a blinding storm. He hurled his bolt with such force that the heavens themselves cracked open. Porphyrion fell, smoldering, his body turning to stone before it struck the ground. But even victory cost blood. The gods grew weary. Their strength, though eternal, was not endless. Then Athena, ever wise, saw what others missed. "These creatures are born of Gaia," she said. "The earth sustains them. Only a being not of Olympus can end them." Zeus understood immediately. "A mortal," he said, and so he called upon Heracles, the greatest of all demigods. The hero who had once suffered Hera's wrath now stood as Olympus's last hope. Armed with his bow and divine arrows, Heracles joined the war, his mortal hand tipping the balance of immortals. With each arrow that struck, a giant fell, each death sending tremors through Gaia's body. Heracles and Zeus fought side by side, lightning and courage woven into one storm. Together they brought down Enceladus, whose fall created the island of Sicily. They struck down Mimas, whose broken form became the volcano of Vesuvius. The giants' bodies became mountains, their breath the winds, their defeat the shape of the earth itself. When the last of them fell, Zeus raised his hand, and the sky fell silent. The clouds parted, revealing the stars once more. The thunder subsided into peace. Gaia's scream echoed one final time, fading into the depths of the world. "You may rule, Sky King," she said, her voice a whisper now. "But remember, every victory buries a seed of rebellion." Zeus stood amid the smoking ruins of battle, his body glowing faintly with the residue of lightning. Around him, the gods gathered, exhausted, scarred, but victorious. The war had proven that no force could challenge Olympus. Yet even in triumph, Zeus felt a shadow settle upon his heart. He looked down at Heracles, the mortal who had turned the tide. "Without him," Zeus said quietly, "we might have fallen." Athena nodded. "Perhaps the strength of gods lies not in their might, but in their ability to trust the mortal hand." Zeus gazed toward the horizon where the earth still smoked. The mountains that once moved now stood still, silent monuments to the wrath of Gaia. He raised his hand, and lightning flickered softly. No longer a weapon, but a reminder. Wars end, but the reasons for them never die. Do wars ever truly end, or do they simply change their names? The ashes of the giants had barely cooled when a deeper silence spread across the world. An unnatural calm, heavy and expectant, as if the very air held its breath. Even the gods could feel it, the stillness before something ancient awakens. Gaia was not done. The defeat of her children, the giants, had scorched her heart. Their bodies lay turned to stone, their cries buried beneath mountains. But a mother's grief is a force beyond divinity. Her pain sank deep into Tartarus, mingling with the darkest energies of the abyss. From that union of earth and shadow, rage and chaos, something immense began to take form. It was not a child. It was a revenge given shape. From the deepest pit of the underworld rose Typhon, the last monster, the final answer to Zeus's reign. He was vast beyond comprehension. His body towered higher than mountains, his shoulders brushing the stars. 100 serpents writhed from his waist, each hissing in a different tongue. His eyes burned like suns, his wings stretched across the horizon, and when he opened his mouth, fire poured forth. Not the divine fire of Zeus's lightning, but something older, rawer, untamed. Even the Titans, shackled in Tartarus, fell silent as he passed. When Typhon emerged into the mortal realm, the world convulsed. Volcanoes erupted. Seas fled their shores. The moon itself trembled in the heavens. From Olympus, Zeus watched the sky turn red. The thunder god had seen war, rebellion, and betrayal, but never this. Mother Earth has given birth to chaos, Athena said beside him, her voice tight with awe. Zeus rose from his throne, lightning spiraling around him. Then chaos shall meet order. He called his brothers. Poseidon came with the roar of waves. Hades appeared in a swirl of shadows. The three who had divided the cosmos once more stood united, as they had not since the dawn of creation. Together, they descended to face the beast. Typhon's roar shattered mountains. His breath set forests aflame. He hurled boulders into the heavens, and each became a new constellation of destruction. When he reached Olympus, the air burned with his fury. "Sky King," he thundered, his voice shaking continents. "You dethroned your father. You chained your kin. You claim the world as yours, but you have only borrowed it. I am its end." Zeus raised his lightning high, the sky splitting open in response. "Then face the end you bring." The heavens and the earth collided. The storm that followed defied description. Lightning met fire. Wind clashed with molten rock. Typhon hurled mountains like weapons. Zeus shattered them with bolts of pure energy. Poseidon summoned tidal waves that struck the monster's legs, while Hades unleashed chains forged from the shadows of Tartarus itself. But Typhon's strength was endless. His serpents struck like armies. His wings beat storms across the world. When he opened his mouth, he breathed hurricanes, swallowing entire valleys. At last, he seized Zeus himself. With one massive hand, he ripped the lightning bolt from his grasp and hurled it into the sea. The king of the gods fell, his power dimmed. Olympus shook. The gods cried out. Hera wept. "The sky has fallen," she whispered. Typhon roared in triumph and began to ascend Olympus, intent on destroying it stone by stone. But Athena, ever the strategist, saw what others could not. She turned to Hermes. "The weapon is not lost," she said. "It waits for faith." Hermes nodded and descended in a flash of wind. He found Zeus buried beneath the roots of a shattered mountain, his body glowing faintly but his strength nearly gone. "Father," Hermes said, kneeling, "the flame still burns. The world still calls your name. Take it back." Zeus opened his eyes. The light within them was weak but alive. He heard it then, the faint prayers of mortals. They were crying to him, not out of fear but hope. Farmers beneath the storm, sailors lost at sea, mothers shielding their children. They whispered his name. Zeus reached toward the sky. The storm responded. The thunderbolt, his truest weapon, rose from the depths of the sea and returned to his hand in a burst of light that blinded the heavens. Reborn in the fire of faith, Zeus rose once more. He flew toward Typhon, his lightning screaming through the clouds. "I am the storm that ends storms," he roared, his voice splitting the air. He struck. The bolt pierced Typhon's chest, and the monster howled, the sound shaking creation itself. Zeus hurled a second strike, then a third until the very mountains caught fire. The creature stumbled, his wings burning, his serpents writhing in agony. With one final cry, Zeus summoned the full wrath of the skies. Every bolt, every storm, every echo of thunder that ever was. The light engulfed Typhon completely. When the brilliance faded, the monster was gone. In his place stood a mountain, Mount Etna, its core still burning with the imprisoned fury of the beast. The fire that erupts from it even now, mortals say, is Typhon's breath. The gods gathered once more upon Olympus, their bodies bruised, their spirits shaken. Hera stood beside Zeus, her voice soft. "You have saved the world again." Zeus looked toward the smoldering horizon. "No," he said quietly. "The world saved itself. The prayers of mortals gave me back my strength. Even gods cannot stand without belief." Athena nodded. "And belief is fragile. Protect it well." Zeus turned his gaze downward, where humans had begun rebuilding their shattered temples. "I will," he said, "but let Etna stand as a reminder, to gods and men alike. that power without purpose becomes its own destruction. The wind quieted, the stars returned, and once more, peace descended upon Olympus. Yet deep beneath Mount Etna, a faint rumble echoed, a heartbeat waiting, eternal, unending. When gods fight monsters, do they risk becoming one themselves? Smoke still curled from Mount Etna, its molten veins glowing like the heartbeats of a buried god. The war was over. Typhon's fury was chained beneath the mountain. The giants lay turned to stone, and the earth finally stilled. For the first time since creation, there was peace. Not silence, peace. The kind that hums quietly, unsure of how long it will last. Zeus stood atop Olympus, watching the land below. The world had survived countless storms, both divine and monstrous. Yet something new was stirring in the air. Something smaller, softer, but alive with potential. Mortals, they had endured through every divine tempest, scattered, frightened, but resilient. Now, as the skies cleared, they began to rise again. Villages formed, fires burned at dusk, and prayers floated upward like drifting embers. Humanity, fragile and flawed, had outlasted even the gods' greatest wars. Zeus watched them with a mixture of pride and unease. Athena joined him, her silver eyes reflecting the dawn. "They rebuild," she said. "No matter how many times we break the world, they shape it anew." "They were meant to," Zeus replied. "They are the children of endurance." Athena tilted her head. "Or perhaps of defiance." Zeus almost smiled. "The two are not so different." Below, men and women tilled the land, raised temples, and sang hymns of gratitude. They no longer feared the gods as before. They revered them with reverent distance, not blind worship. They prayed to Zeus not only as the bringer of storms, but as the guardian of justice, the balance keeper. To Athena, they prayed for wisdom, to Demeter for harvest, to Poseidon for safe seas. The gods had become more than rulers, they had become symbols of ideals. It was the beginning of something new, the age of man. But where there is creation, there is always cost. Hades, silent as ever, emerged from the shadowed halls of the underworld. "Brother," he said, "your reign stretches far, but men die, their souls crowd my gates. With each new birth, there are 10 new deaths. Do they even know what awaits them?" Zeus's expression darkened. "They know enough to live. The rest is your domain." Hades's eyes gleamed. "Then my kingdom will outgrow even Olympus." Zeus did not answer, for he knew it was true. Mortality was not a flaw, it was the foundation of human meaning. But it also meant that Hades's realm would always expand, that sorrow would always accompany creation. Elsewhere, Poseidon brooded beneath the waves. The humans sailed his waters now, bold and unafraid, their ships cutting through seas once worshipped as sacred. "They forget who commands these tides," he growled, his voice rolling like distant thunder underwater. Amphitrite, his queen, placed a hand upon his arm. "Perhaps they no longer fear you because they have learned to trust you." "Trust?" Poseidon's brow furrowed. "Trust makes them reckless." "Or free," she replied softly. The gods, once feared as living forces of nature, were now becoming something else. Teachers, stories, guides. The mortals no longer lived beneath their shadows. They lived within their light. On Olympus, Hera observed this transformation in silence. "They love you," she said to Zeus one evening, "but not as they once did. You've become an idea to them, not a presence." Zeus looked down at the glowing fires below. "Perhaps that is better. A ruler who must always be seen is never truly trusted." "Or perhaps," Hera said, her voice cutting softly through the wind, "you fear being forgotten." He did not answer, but her words lingered like distant thunder. As generations passed, mortals began to build cities of marble and song. Athens, Corinth, Mycenae, each dedicated to a god, each shaped by their divine myth. Temples rose like mountains of faith. Priests interpreted omens. Poets told stories by firelight. And in each tale, the gods lived again. Yet, with each retelling, their forms began to change. Zeus became the wise father, not the stormbringer. Athena, the pure guardian of reason, rather than the warrior of wrath. Even Hera, once seen as vengeful, became a symbol of devotion and order. The gods were evolving not through power, but through memory. One night, as the stars wheeled above Olympus, Zeus walked alone to the edge of the sky. He could hear the murmur of human life below, a soft, constant pulse that sounded almost like the beating of a great heart. "They have taken our fire," he murmured, "our laws, our thunder, our wisdom, and made them their own." Perhaps that was the purpose all along. A warm breeze brushed against his face. It carried the scent of burning incense and sea salt, the sound of human prayers whispered in 1,000 tongues. "They no longer need us to rule them," he said quietly, "only to remind them." From behind him, Athena's voice drifted like a calm wind. "And what will you remind them of, Father?" Zeus looked out over the horizon, where dawn was breaking. That power without humility always ends in storm. That even gods must learn to listen. Athena smiled faintly. "Then perhaps the world is safer now than it has ever been." "Safer," Zeus repeated. "No, just wiser." Below, mortals laughed, loved, built, and dreamed. They carved stories into stone, painted myths upon walls, and gazed at the stars not in fear, but wonder. They had become the authors of their own destiny, guided by gods but no longer bound by them. Zeus turned from the world with a strange peace in his eyes. "Let this be their age," he said. "The age where men stand tall beneath the sky, not as servants, but as echoes of the divine." And so, as the fires of civilization spread, the gods withdrew to their mountain, no longer intervening in every prayer or storm. They watched instead, silent guardians of a world learning to walk on its own. The thunder grew softer. The storms came less often. The king of gods had learned that true dominion lies not in control, but in letting creation find its own balance. Is peace possible in a world that remembers war? Or does memory itself ensure that conflict never dies? The world had entered an age of calm, but peace is never permanent, not even for gods. Beneath the serenity of Olympus, whispers began to stir. They came from Delphi, where vapors rose from the earth and mortals claimed to hear the voices of eternity itself. The oracle of Delphi, priestess of Apollo, sat above the sacred chasm, her eyes veiled in mist. The smoke that surrounded her was said to be the breath of Gaia, the same voice that had once defied Zeus in ages past. Now that voice murmured again, faint but urgent. Mortals traveled from across Greece to hear her words, bearing offerings of gold, oil, and faith. They came seeking comfort, but what they found instead was fear. One afternoon, as the sun hung low over Mount Parnassus, the oracle's body convulsed. Her voice changed, deep and otherworldly, echoing through the marble temple. "A time will come when gods will fade. The age of Olympus will dim like embers in ash. The thrones will stand, but none shall sit. Mortals will rule themselves, and memory will become myth." The priests recoiled. The visitors fled. The word spread like wildfire across the land, reaching the ears of kings, heroes, and finally, the gods themselves. When the news reached Olympus, silence fell heavier than thunder. The immortals gathered in the golden hall. Each eye turned toward Zeus. Apollo spoke first, his voice steady but cold. "The words came from my oracle. I did not teach her this prophecy. It came from the earth itself." Athena frowned. "Then perhaps the earth remembers too much." Hera rose, her tone sharp. "Is this another challenge, Zeus? Another rebellion hiding behind riddles?" Zeus said nothing. His gaze was fixed beyond the hall, toward the horizon where storms slept. The oracle's words echoed in his mind, ancient and inevitable. He had seen many ages rise and fall, wars of titans, giants, monsters, and men. But never had he considered the fall of gods themselves. Later that night, he stood alone upon the edge of Olympus. Below, mortals burned fires in celebration, singing songs of love, not worship. Once, their every breath had depended on divine favor. Now they built their own temples, their own laws. Zeus could feel it, the slow fading of faith. Perhaps this is what time does to all things, he whispered. Even the eternal. Athena appeared beside him, her presence soft but commanding. You have ruled for ages, Father. If we must fade, perhaps it is not an ending, but a transformation. Zeus turned to her. Transformation into what? Into memory, she replied. Into story. The mortals you shaped will carry your name in their tongues long after your thunder sleeps. Zeus looked away. Memory is a fragile throne. Then strengthen it, Athena said. Through wisdom, not fear. Through legacy, not dominance. But not all gods shared her calm. Poseidon raged beneath the seas, his trident shaking the waves. I will not vanish into their songs, he growled. They owe us their existence. Hades, far below, watched from his shadowed realm. Existence ends for all things, brother, he said quietly. Even divinity must decay to make room for what follows. For the first time in eternity, Zeus felt what mortals called doubt. The oracle's words gnawed at him like rust on gold. Could Olympus truly fall? Could gods truly die? Not by sword, but by silence? Days passed. The sky darkened, though no storm was called. Mortals spoke of strange omens. Temples cracking, rivers reversing their flow, stars flickering out. They began to fear the gods again, not for their wrath, but for their weakness. At Delphi, the oracle spoke once more, her voice trembling as though she too feared what she was forced to say. When the flame of worship dims, when temples turn to dust, when the last hymn fades upon mortal lips, Olympus shall sleep, but never die. Zeus listened from afar, and something within him stirred. Not anger, but understanding. The prophecy was not a curse. It was a truth. He summoned the gods one final time. The great hall filled with light, Poseidon's ocean shimmer, Athena's golden glow, Apollo's radiance, Artemis's moonlight. Even Hera, stoic and silent, took her seat beside him. My family, Zeus began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. We have ruled the world since its birth. We have seen monsters rise and fall, and men learn to shape fire. But our power was never in thunder or flame, it was in belief. And belief cannot be commanded. It must be earned. Athena nodded slowly. So what will we do? Zeus raised his hand, and lightning danced between his fingers. Not furious, but calm. We will not rage against the tide. We will let the world grow. And when they forget our names, we will rest. Hera's voice softened. And if they remember? Zeus smiled faintly. Then the sky will answer again. Outside, the first storm in decades rolled gently across the horizon. Not with destruction, but with grace. Rain fell on temples and fields alike, washing the marble clean. The world seemed to sigh in relief, as though both gods and mortals understood something sacred. Endings are not always loss. They are simply transformation. That night, Zeus looked once more toward Delphi. The oracle, her body frail from countless prophecies, felt his gaze and smiled through her trance. Even you cannot stop time, she whispered to the air, but you can choose how you fade. Zeus closed his eyes. Then I will fade like thunder, heard even after the storm has passed. Can eternity truly last forever? Or does even forever need an end to be remembered? Even gods cannot see all things. Some truths lie beyond thunder, beyond prophecy, beyond will itself. In the quiet that followed the oracle's warning, Zeus began to feel the weight of something greater than kingship pressing upon him. The subtle, unbreakable rhythm that governs all existence. It was called Moira. The mortals knew it as fate, destiny, inevitability. But to the gods it had faces, 3 faces, each as ancient as chaos itself. They were the Moirai, the Fates, and not even Zeus dared to defy them. They lived in a place between worlds, where time flowed like thread and reality hung upon a single loom. Their hall was dim and endless, filled with the faint hum of spinning fibers, each one a life, a story, a heartbeat. The first, Clotho, sat by the wheel, her hands soft but relentless as she spun the threads of life from raw possibility. The second, Lachesis, measured each strand with calm precision, deciding its length and course. And the last, Atropos, silent and ancient, waited with her shears, ready to cut when the moment came. No crown could command them, no prayer could sway them. When Zeus descended to their realm, the air itself thickened. Even lightning dimmed in that place. The fates looked up but did not bow. "You come, Sky King," Clotho said, her voice like the rustle of silk. "But you do not belong here." Zeus inclined his head, respectful yet resolute. "I seek to understand what even thunder cannot change." Lachesis smiled faintly. "Then you already know the answer. You rule the heavens, but we rule the pattern beneath them." "I have seen the end," Zeus said. "The oracle spoke of our fading. Tell me, can Olympus be spared?" Atropos, who rarely spoke, lifted her shears, the metal glinting in the dim light. "Spared?" she echoed. "Nothing is spared. Not mortals, not gods. Only the thread remains, woven anew." Zeus's jaw tightened. "Then why rule at all if all rule ends?" "Clotho's will spun faster. Because even endings need purpose. Because order, though temporary, gives beauty to the chaos." The god of thunder fell silent, his eyes tracing the countless threads around him, each glowing faintly, each representing a life below. He saw the spark of a child's laughter, the despair of an old man, the rise and fall of kings, all woven together into a single, shimmering tapestry. And then, among them, he saw another thread, bright, golden, pulsing like lightning itself. He reached out instinctively. "This one, what is it?" Lachesis followed his gaze. "That is your own thread, Zeus." The god's hand froze. "Even mine, especially yours," she said. "For every ruler is bound by the laws he enforces." Zeus studied the thread. It was longer than most, but not infinite. At its end, he saw not darkness, but transformation. His thread did not stop. It split into many smaller lines, branching into other colors, weaving through mortal lives, through temples and myths, through songs yet to be sung. He exhaled slowly. "So I do not end, I change." The three fates smiled as one. "Now you understand." Zeus turned to leave, but Atropos's voice halted him. "Be warned, Sky King. The moment you seek to control your thread is the moment it unravels." He nodded, the sound of the loom following him as he ascended back toward Olympus. When he returned, Athena was waiting. "You went to them," she said quietly. "I had to," Zeus answered. "The fates hold the map of what even gods cannot see." "What did you learn?" "That I am not eternal," he said. "But my choices are." Athena smiled faintly. "Then you have learned what wisdom truly is." Days passed, and Zeus began to view the world differently. He no longer sought to change destiny, only to shape it kindly. When storms gathered, he sent them where the earth thirsted most. When lightning struck, it sparked growth rather than destruction. His rule softened. His thunder became guidance. The other gods noticed. Poseidon teased him for his calm. Hera, quietly, began to stand closer to him again. Even Hermes, ever mischievous, bowed lower when passing. Something in the air of Olympus had changed, not fear, but reverence. Below, mortals thrived. They built temples to the fates alongside those of the gods. In every weaving woman, in every craftsman shaping clay, Zeus saw reflections of the loom he had visited, the same endless pattern of creation and decay. But not all were at peace. Apollo came to him one night, his golden light flickering with unease. "You have seen fate," he said. "Then you know my gift of prophecy is meaningless." Zeus shook his head. "No. You show them the possibilities. The fates decide the outcome. Both are needed. Without hope, even destiny loses its purpose." Apollo considered his words and smiled faintly. "Then perhaps even the gods need to dream." As time flowed onward, the fabric of the world tightened. The threads of gods and men intertwined more than ever before. Every storm, Every birth, every death was part of something vast and unseen. And though Zeus knew he could not change fate, he found comfort in one truth. The pattern was beautiful precisely because it could not be controlled. He stood upon Olympus one final evening, watching the constellations drift above. Somewhere below, a mother told her child a story about a god who ruled the skies with thunder in his hands and kindness in his heart. The sound of that tale reached him faintly, carried by the wind. He smiled. Maybe that was the true thread of immortality, not power but memory. Is power still power when it cannot change destiny? Or does surrender make it divine? Even after the fate's warning, the world did not slow. Life continued its rhythm. Birth, toil, love, loss, and Zeus, the eternal witness, began to see that power without testing becomes decay. So, in his wisdom, he set forth trials, not to punish creation, but to measure it, to test whether balance could exist without fear. But even gods are tested by their own designs. The first trial, the flood of forgetfulness mortals had grown arrogant. Cities rose to challenge mountains, kings called themselves divine, and altars once built for gratitude became monuments to vanity. They prayed to Zeus not out of awe, but out of habit. Faith had become currency, so Zeus whispered to the clouds. The rains began, not harsh at first, but steady, endless. Rivers swelled, seas climbed, mountains disappeared beneath gray waves. From the heavens he watched the world sink. Yet among the chaos, two mortals still prayed, not for rescue, but for forgiveness. Their names were Deucalion and Pyrrha, husband and wife, children of Prometheus's line. As the last mountaintop vanished, Zeus stilled the storm. The couple floated upon a wooden chest, clinging to hope. When the waters receded, they found themselves alone on the new earth, silent except for the cries of seabirds. Rebuild, Zeus told them through the wind, not with arrogance, but with gratitude. And so they cast stones over their shoulders, and from those stones, new men and women were born. Stronger, humbler, remembering both the flood and the mercy that followed. Peace lasted, but pride always returns. Mortals began forging weapons not to defend, but to conquer. They looked upon the sky and said, "We too can make thunder." Hephaestus, god of the forge, felt their echo. They built furnaces and called them divine. They shaped metal and called themselves creators. Some even claimed to rival the gods themselves. Zeus did not strike them down. Instead, he sent drought. For 10 years, the skies remained clear, the rivers dust. In their desperation, mortals turned inward, not to arrogance, but to cooperation. They shared what remained, learned compassion, and rediscovered humility. When the first rain finally fell, they did not raise temples to Zeus. They raised wells for one another. From Olympus, the god of thunder smiled. Perhaps they are learning what it means to rule themselves. But one test remained, the hardest of all: absence. Zeus withdrew his presence entirely. No lightning, no homem, no vesper. The priests waited for signs that never came. The oracles sat silent. For the first time since creation, the heavens did not answer. Years passed. Generations came and went. Some despaired. Others flourished. The mortals learned to govern, to reason, to seek the divine within themselves. Philosophy was born where prayer had once been. And yet, in every mind, there lingered a question. Have the gods left us, or are we being trusted? It was then that Athena came to Zeus. They build cities in your silence, she said. They are growing wise. Zeus gazed downward, his expression unreadable. Then the silence was the truest gift I could give them. But even gods must prove themselves. The Titans stirred in Tartarus, whispering that Zeus had grown soft. Among them, one voice rose, the ancient serpent Ophion, once guardian of the heavens before Zeus's reign. Through cracks in his prison, he spoke to the wind. He who rules forever must prove he deserves forever. The whisper reached Olympus like a storm returning from memory. Zeus felt the challenge burn within him. He descended into the underworld to face Ophion, who had taken the form of a shadow vast as eternity. "Why do you seek me?" the serpent hissed. You have conquered all but time. Zeus raised his lightning, because even eternity must remain honest. Their clash was not of flame or thunder, but of will. Lightning met darkness, order met entropy. When the storm cleared, Ophion's form was gone, dissolved into nothing, but his final words lingered. Even gods need reminders of their limits. When Zeus returned to Olympus, his hands trembled. Power could defeat rebellion, but not reflection. The battle had not broken him, but it had humbled him. The world grew complex. Kings fought wars in Zeus's name. Priests claimed to hear his commands and twisted them to justify cruelty. Seeing his name wielded as a weapon wounded him more than any monster ever had. So Zeus sent one final trial, not of storm or silence, but of conscience. He appeared to a humble shepherd, cloaked as a weary traveler. The man offered him food and shelter without knowing who he was. Zeus smiled. Tell me, he asked, what do you think of the gods? The shepherd hesitated. They are mighty, yes, but if they truly wish to guide us, they must remember what it means to be small. Zeus's eyes softened. Then perhaps they do. When he returned to Olympus, he carried that sentence with him. For centuries after, he ruled not as conqueror, but as caretaker, ensuring that justice was tempered with empathy. At last, the gods themselves grew weary. Hera's jealousy softened into patience. Poseidon's tempests calmed into song. Even Hades found comfort in his solitude. The cosmos exhaled. Zeus stood on the peak of Olympus and looked at the world. Humans, flawed yet brilliant, their fires flickering like constellations across the land. They no longer feared his thunder. They understood it. He whispered, perhaps my truest trial was not to rule them, but to let them stand. Lightning rippled through the clouds, not as wrath, but as applause. The storm had finally learned restraint. Can justice exist without suffering? Or is suffering the mirror that teaches us mercy? Even as Zeus learned restraint, the fire of passion remained his oldest weakness. For the king of gods, love was not a gentle flame. It was lightning in human form, bright and unpredictable. And among all his loves, none would leave a scar as deep as Semele. She was a mortal princess of Thebes, daughter of Cadmus, her beauty radiant but humble. Her laughter, it was said, could quiet storms. Unlike the queens and goddesses who sought Olympus, Semele worshipped from afar, never imagining the eyes of Zeus would fall upon her. But lightning sees everything. One night, as she walked through the fields beneath a sleeping sky, a storm gathered without warning. Thunder rumbled, soft at first, then closer. She raised her hands to the wind and whispered, Lord of the skies, may your light never strike where hearts are pure. Zeus heard. He descended not in fire, but as a man cloaked in shadow and silver light. Your heart, he said, shines brighter than the heavens. Semele trembled. If you are who I think you are, then speak not like a god, speak like a man. And he did. For many nights, Zeus came to her in mortal form, shedding his thunder for tenderness. They spoke, laughed, and dreamed beneath the stars. To her, he was not the king of Olympus, but a stranger who made the sky feel close enough to touch. Soon she carried his child. When Hera learned of it, the air itself grew cold. Her fury was quiet, deliberate, the kind that could tear heaven apart with patience alone. She came to Semele disguised as an old woman, gentle and curious. You are blessed, Hera said sweetly, to have won such a lover. But tell me, how can you be sure it is truly Zeus who visits you? Semele's heart faltered. He comes with warmth. He speaks with thunder in his eyes. The old woman smiled knowingly. Words and warmth are easy for gods to mimic. Ask him to prove it. Ask him to show himself in all his divine glory. Surely the king of heaven would not deny the mother of his child that honor. When Hera vanished, her words lingered like venom. That night, when Zeus returned, Semele met him not with love, but with fear disguised as curiosity. If you truly are who you say, she whispered, show me your true self, your godhood. Zeus froze. You do not know what you ask. I must, she said softly. For my heart believes, but my mind doubts. He begged her to reconsider. My true form is not for mortal eyes. It is fire unending, the language of stars. It will destroy you. But Semele, swayed by Hera's poison and her own longing for truth, pleaded again. If your love is real, you will not hide it. Zeus closed his eyes. Then let it be so. He revealed himself, not as man, not as king, but as creation incarnate. His body became lightning, his voice thunder, his essence brighter than dawn itself. For an instant Semele saw eternity. Then the light consumed her. When the fire faded, Zeus stood alone, holding nothing but ashes, and within them, the faint pulse of life. The child she carried had not perished. Carefully, with trembling hands, he gathered the spark from the ashes and placed it inside himself, sewing it into his thigh to protect it until it could be born. From pain came Dionysus, god of wine, madness, and rebirth. When he emerged months later, the heavens stirred with unease. For in him burned both mortal fragility and divine wildness. He would be the only god to know death and return, the only bridge between joy and despair. Zeus loved him deeply, not only as a son, but as the echo of his own loss. Yet Hera's rage did not end. She sent madness to plague Dionysus, driving him to wander the earth in chaos and ecstasy. Wherever he walked, vines burst from the ground, and mortals danced until they forgot sorrow itself. Athena once said to Zeus, "Your son carries her spirit, the beauty of what dies yet refuses to vanish." And Zeus answered quietly, "Then perhaps Semele never truly burned." From the ashes of her mortal form, a lesson had taken root. Truth, when revealed too soon, destroys. When sought with patience, it transforms. Mortals whispered that thunder still rolled softly over Thebes when the god of the sky grieved her. And in the spring, when vines blossomed anew, the people poured wine upon the earth, not to forget, but to remember. One night, when the world was quiet, Hera found Zeus standing upon Olympus's edge, looking toward the city below. "Do you mourn her still?" she asked. Zeus did not turn. "I mourn the moment she stopped believing without proof." Hera's voice softened, almost pitying. "And yet, is that not what mortals are meant to do? Seek proof of the divine?" Zeus smiled faintly. "Yes, and perhaps that is why they are the only ones who can feel love without limits." The queen said nothing more. The storm between them calmed, if only for a breath. Below, the first festivals of Dionysus began. Songs, dances, wild laughter that echoed through hills and valleys. To mortals, it was celebration. To gods, remembrance. And high above, Zeus closed his eyes. For a heartbeat, he thought he heard Semele's laughter again, soft as rain against fire. Is truth always fatal to those who seek it? Or is it the fire that births something divine? Immortality, every mortal's dream, every god's burden. To live forever sounds like freedom. Yet for Zeus, eternity had begun to feel like a cage built of gold and thunder. The wars were over, the storms tamed, and Olympus gleamed brighter than ever. But what remains for a ruler when there are no more battles to win? Silence, and the echo of one's own thoughts. From his marble throne, Zeus gazed upon the world below. The mortals had flourished. Cities pulsed with music, poetry, and invention. Fires burned in every hearth, not from stolen lightning now, but from their own making. Humanity had become the mirror of his creation, and that was precisely what unsettled him. "They grow faster than we change," he murmured. Athena stood beside him, serene as always. Perhaps that is their gift, to burn brightly before fading. "And ours?" Zeus asked quietly. "To endure without end?" Athena's eyes softened. "To remember, but memory is a heavy crown." The years folded into centuries. Mortals were born, lived, and died beneath his gaze, their entire lives passing like a single breath of wind. He watched lovers age, children bury their parents, civilizations rise and fall like tides. The gods remained untouched by time, but untouched also means unmoved. One evening, Zeus descended in disguise, walking among mortals as he once had in ages past. He found a gray-haired storyteller by a fire, surrounded by children who listened wide-eyed to tales of thunder and gods. "And do you believe these stories?" Zeus asked, feigning curiosity. The old man smiled, his eyes bright. "Believe? Belief isn't the point. They remind us that even the mighty must answer to something greater." "Something greater than the gods?" Zeus asked. The storyteller nodded. "Time, love, death, the things that even gods cannot escape." Zeus said nothing. The words lodged deep within him, like lightning that refuses to strike. He returned to Olympus that night, quiet and thoughtful. Hera found him standing on the balcony, watching the stars. "You walk among them again," she said softly. "You envy them still." Zeus exhaled. "They live, truly live. Every joy, every sorrow so fleeting, yet so full. Their hearts beat faster because they know one day it will stop." Hera studied him for a moment. "And would you trade eternity for that heartbeat?" Zeus looked away. "Sometimes, yes, but no god can choose mortality. The very act of creation had bound him to timelessness. And eternity, he realized, was not a gift. It was a test of endurance. Days turned into ages. The mortals built temples so grand they touched the clouds. But Zeus no longer visited them. Their prayers had become routine, recited, not felt. He found himself longing not for worship, but for wonder. The kind he had once seen in a child's face watching lightning split the sky for the first time. The other gods felt it too. Poseidon's seas grew restless, his tempests more frequent. Apollo's light dimmed in melancholy. Even Athena, wise and unshakable, spent long hours in silence. Olympus was eternal, but eternity was starting to feel like decay. One night, Zeus called a council of the gods. The air in the great hall was heavy, shimmering with unease. "My kin," Zeus began, "have you ever asked yourselves what it means to never die?" Hades's voice was the first to answer, smooth and dark. "To witness everything and own nothing." A murmur rippled through the hall. Hera folded her arms. "We are gods. Ownership is our nature." "Then why does it feel hollow?" Zeus asked, his tone weary. "We do not grow. We do not change. We merely are." Ares slammed his spear against the floor. "Change is for mortals. We are perfection." Zeus turned to him, his gaze sharp. "Perfection is stagnation, Ares. Even chaos moves." Silence followed. For the first time, the word immortal did not sound like victory. It sounded like confinement. After the council, Zeus retreated to his solitude. He looked out across the horizon, where day and night met in perfect balance. He realized that every storm he had ever cast, every law he had ever made, was meant to bring balance, to others but never to himself. It was then that Prometheus's old words returned to him. "You rule through fear of endings because you've never faced one yourself." Perhaps that was the gods' true weakness. Not pride, not wrath, but the absence of death. Without it, they had no urgency, no empathy, no need to change. Zeus closed his eyes and spoke softly to the wind. "If I cannot die, then let me remember what it means to lose." And so, over time, he began to let go. He allowed mortals to forget him for seasons, even years. He watched as new stories took shape, as men named the stars not after gods but after themselves. Each time a temple crumbled, he felt no anger, only relief, because in every ruin lay proof that life continued. When Hera found him again, he was older, not in body, but in spirit. "You've grown quiet," she said. "I've grown grateful," he replied. "For what is immortality worth, if it cannot be shared with those who vanish?" She touched his hand, for the first time in centuries without tension. "Then perhaps eternity is not about never dying," she said. "Perhaps it's about being remembered with love, not fear." Below them, mortals laughed beneath flickering lamps, oblivious to the divine eyes watching. Their songs echoed up the mountainside, carried by the wind. Zeus smiled faintly. He no longer needed their prayers. Their existence was enough. As he turned from the balcony, a single thought passed through him, soft as thunder in the distance. Maybe immortality was never meant to preserve life. Maybe it was meant to teach gods what life truly is. Does immortality preserve us? Or hollow us out until we long for the very death we forbade? The world had quieted. Storms now served the seasons, not wrath. Rivers found their courses, crops grew tall, and the air above Olympus was still, too still. Zeus stood upon his throne, but the thunder in his heart was fading into memory. He remembered the beginning, the raw fire of rebellion, the roar of battle, the moment lightning first crowned him king. Those were days of purpose, when every strike of thunder meant something. But now, centuries later, even thunder had grown weary. Hera noticed first. "You look at the world as if it has betrayed you," she said one evening. Zeus shook his head. "Not betrayal, nostalgia." "For what?" she asked. "For the golden age," he murmured. "The age before ambition, before worship. When gods and mortals shared the same table and the world itself felt new. The memory glimmered like sunlight through the clouds. Back then, the earth had been simple, no temples, no hierarchy, no fear. Mortals lived close to nature, content with what the world gave. There was no need for thunder, no need for prayers. The gods walked among them, unseen but present, guiding through instinct rather than command. Zeus sighed. They trusted without asking. They lived without taking more than they needed. That was harmony. Athena, listening nearby, smiled softly. And yet, Father, harmony without challenge breeds stagnation. Even perfection grows dull. Then perhaps, Zeus replied, imperfection is the true divine spark. He descended to the world once more, disguised as a wanderer cloaked in white. The mortals greeted him kindly, offering food and wine. In their laughter, he heard faint echoes of that old age, the golden one. But as he walked farther, he saw what time had done. The fields were scarred by plows driven for profit, not survival. The cities glimmered with ambition, but the songs of gratitude had grown faint. Men still spoke the names of gods, but their eyes sought power, not peace. That night, he sat by a river reflecting the stars and whispered to the wind. When did creation become conquest? An old fisherman nearby, unaware he was speaking to the Sky Father himself, answered, when we forgot that the world gives because it loves, not because it owes. The words struck him deeper than any rebellion ever had. For 3 days, Zeus walked among the humble, farmers, mothers, poets, shepherds. He found in them fragments of the old beauty, kindness and struggle, hope and hunger, laughter and sorrow. The golden age, he realized, was not gone. It was scattered, living inside the smallest gestures. He returned to Olympus changed. The gods noticed it in his eyes, a calm, almost mortal softness. Poseidon greeted him with a booming laugh. You look as though you've seen the end of the world again. No, Zeus replied. I've seen its beginning hiding in plain sight. Hera raised an eyebrow. And what of the mortals? Do they still worship? They live, he said. That is worship enough. But as time pressed on, even Olympus began to fade into quiet reverie. The younger gods grew restless. Hermes longed for new adventures. Apollo's temples echoed with fewer songs. And even Athena found herself watching mortals' libraries fill with their own wisdom. They learn too fast, Apollo said once, his light dimming with melancholy. Soon they will forget who taught them to dream. Zeus smiled faintly. Then they will have completed the lesson. It was then that he began to dream, a rare thing for a god. In his dreams, he saw the golden age reborn. But this time, it was not made of marble and lightning. It was made of humanity. In that vision, the world was peaceful not because gods ruled it, but because men remembered the rhythm of the sky and sea. They built not for power, but for beauty. Their songs honored not Olympus, but each other. And above them, the thunder rolled softly, not as command, but as lullaby. When he woke, tears traced the lines of his immortal face. Hera found him there, his eyes distant. You dream now? she asked quietly. Yes, he said, and in the dream I am no god at all, just a witness. Hera looked away. And does that make you happy? Zeus smiled, a weary but genuine smile. It makes me peaceful. The next morning he gathered the gods upon Olympus. For eons we have watched over the world, he began. But the time has come to step back, not as rulers, but as guardians of memory. Let men live their stories as we once lived ours. Ares scoffed. Without us, they will destroy themselves. Perhaps, Zeus said, but even destruction teaches. Athena's voice carried over the murmurs. And what becomes of us? Zeus looked to the horizon, where the mortal fires flickered like stars below. We remain, not as kings but as echoes. Every time a mortal forgives, every time they love, every time they show courage, they call our names without knowing it. The gods fell silent, each lost in thought. Even Hera's heart softened, though she hid it behind her poise. That evening, Zeus walked alone to the summit of Olympus, where the wind carried the world's quiet heartbeat. He closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of humanity like distant thunder beneath his feet. This is what eternity was for, he whispered. Not to rule forever, but to create something that doesn't need me. As the night deepened, lightning rippled across the horizon. Not in fury, but in reflection, illuminating the earth below in gold. For one fleeting moment, it seemed the world had returned to that first light, the golden age reborn, not in the heavens, but in the hearts of mortals. He smiled, content. Maybe, he murmured. The dream was never meant to be remembered, only relived. What happens when even gods long for their beginnings, when immortality aches for the innocence it once created? The world had grown louder. Cities now hummed with life. Empires rose upon the bones of old kingdoms, and mortals, once trembling before the skies, walked with heads unbowed. Yet in that constant motion, the heavens had fallen silent. Zeus sat upon his throne atop Olympus, listening to the rhythm of a world that no longer called his name. The fires of worship had dimmed. Temples lay cracked and ivy-clad. Mortals no longer looked upward for guidance, they looked inward. And for the first time in eternity, Zeus felt something he had not known since his youth. Peace. The thunder still existed, but it was no longer a command. It had softened into something else, a heartbeat beneath the sky. The storm was resting, its power dormant, but never gone. From her place beside him, Hera watched him quietly. The world forgets us more each day, she said. Zeus smiled faintly. No, they remember differently now. Not through fear, but through wisdom. Our names may fade, but our lessons echo in their hearts. She studied him, surprised by his calm. And that does not trouble you? He turned his gaze toward the horizon, where dawn met the sea. When the wind moves through the trees, do you still hear my voice in it? Yes, Hera admitted softly. Then they will too, Zeus said. Every storm, every spark, every moment of balance between chaos and peace. That is me. I do not need temples for thunder to speak. He rose and walked to the edge of Olympus. Below, the mortal world shimmered with its own kind of divinity. Children laughing in the streets, poets singing by rivers, sailors whispering prayers not for mercy, but gratitude. Look at them, Zeus murmured. Once they cowered from us. Now they create as we did. They shape their fates, they forge meaning. In them, the spark of Olympus still burns. Athena approached, her golden eyes reflecting the clouds below. You taught them to think, to question. That was always the path toward this. Zeus nodded. I only fear what comes when they forget the balance we fought for. Athena smiled gently. Then remind them not through thunder, but through silence. Even the absence of gods can teach. He considered her words. She was right. The time for storms had passed. The time for stillness had come. That night, he wandered the halls of Olympus, his footsteps echoing through corridors of marble and memory. Statues of battles long won loomed around him. The Titanomachy, the fall of the giants, the birth of mortals. each victory carved into stone, immortalized. Yet now they seemed distant. He paused before one statue, his own likeness youthful and unyielding, lightning raised high. The artist had captured his power, but not his understanding. "Younger me," he whispered. "You thought thunder could hold the world together. You were wrong. It was never thunder, it was balance." Outside, the sky rumbled faintly, as if the heavens themselves agreed. In the mortal realm, the people of Greece had begun turning toward new philosophies. Reason over myth, thought over prayer. They spoke of the cosmos as natural law, of forces unseen yet measurable. But Zeus did not grieve, for every law discovered was merely another name for him. Gravity, order, justice. These were all echoes of the thunder's truth. As centuries passed, he appeared less and less among mortals. The gods faded from daily life, retreating into memory. Yet sometimes, on nights of heavy rain, travelers still swore they saw a figure on a distant peak, tall and crowned with light, watching in silence as the storm passed below. He no longer needed to be seen, to rule, to be praised. The thunder within him had grown quiet, not gone, but gentle, like a lullaby for the world he once commanded. Hera joined him again one evening as lightning flickered far away. "You've grown softer," she said, her tone half fond, half teasing. "I've grown older," he replied. "Even eternity matures." "Do you ever miss the chaos?" she asked. Zeus thought for a long moment. "Sometimes, but chaos is the language of beginnings. I am content being its echo." She smiled faintly. "And what will become of us now, when even belief fades?" He turned to her, his eyes glowing softly like distant storms. "We endure not as gods, but as memory, when they tell stories of courage, of justice, of the light that follows darkness. They call upon us without knowing. We live wherever meaning survives." As the night deepened, thunder rolled once more, slow and low, like the sigh of an old friend. The mortals below looked up, some startled, others smiling. Children counted between lightning and sound, and for a fleeting instant, the world felt connected again. Heaven and earth sharing one breath. On Olympus, Zeus closed his eyes. His voice, deep and steady, drifted through the air like a whisper of rain. When the storm rests, what remains of the thunder? The answer came not in words, but in feeling peace, continuity, life. The king of gods sat back upon his throne, not as ruler, but as guardian of quiet balance. The thunder slept, but the world pulsed with its rhythm. And so, the age of Zeus did not end in silence. It ended in harmony, an eternal hum between heaven and earth, between what was divine and what was human. For even when the skies grow still, thunder never truly dies. It only learns to whisper. The thunder no longer ruled the world, but its echo remained. It lingered in the stories men told, in the patterns of the stars, in the moral rhythm of right and wrong. Though Olympus had quieted, humanity had begun to sing its name in 1,000 new forms. From the marble of Greece to the marble of Rome, the myths did not die, they transformed. Where once they said Zeus, the Romans began to say Jupiter. His lightning became the symbol of order, of empire, of reason cloaked in divine authority. The temples rose again, grander, colder, more disciplined, but the heart of the thunder still beat beneath the stone. And Zeus watched it all. From the misted heights of Olympus, he saw the world reshape his image, carving his face into new forms, giving him new names. Some called him ruler of the sky, others, lord of destiny. Yet in each name he recognized himself, an eternal truth dressed in mortal language. Athena once asked him, "Do you mind that they change us?" Zeus smiled faintly. "They do not change us. They interpret us. That is how memory survives." And indeed, the mortals had begun to build something extraordinary. Continuity. Each generation inherited the myths, but molded them to its own image. They made the gods reflections of their own fears, desires, and hopes. The legends became a mirror of humanity's growing self-awareness. Zeus marveled at their courage, to take the divine and reshape it, to question even their creators. Perhaps, he mused, we gave them too much of ourselves. Apollo laughed softly. Or exactly enough. As centuries turned, the language of myth began to merge with philosophy. Great thinkers spoke of logos, the divine reason underlying all things. Some called it fate, others called it balance. But in every form, Zeus recognized the same voice that had once ruled the skies. Order, harmony, justice. The thunder had simply learned a new vocabulary. Yet with every evolution came loss. The temples of Greece began to crumble. Offerings grew rare. The prayers that once rose like wind from every mountain village now faded to a whisper of nostalgia. One evening, Hera stood beside Zeus as they watched a column of smoke rise from what had once been his greatest temple at Olympia. The mortals were melting bronze statues for weapons. They destroy us, she said bitterly. Zeus shook his head.
No.
They use us. They turn memory into strength. We are no longer their masters, Hera. We are their teachers. Her eyes softened, though her pride resisted. Teachers should not be forgotten. They won't forget, Zeus said. They will just stop realizing that they remember. In time, the names changed again. Zeus became Jupiter. Jupiter became Deus, a single syllable carrying the weight of creation. From Deus came God, and in that word, his essence lived on, cloaked in a new language, worshipped in new temples. The king of Olympus watched humanity bend his thunder into prayer once more. Yet this time it was not to him alone, it was to the idea of divinity itself. Do you see it? Athena whispered. They have taken what we were and made it infinite. Zeus nodded. They no longer see faces in the clouds. They see meaning. That is the highest form of remembrance. And as the empires rose and fell, Rome's legions, Byzantium's flame, the ages of shadow and light, he remained unseen, but present. His power had changed form. No longer the crack of lightning, but the flicker of inspiration. No longer the roar of storms, but the whisper that urged men to seek justice, to build, to dream. He was no longer the god above them. He had become the principle within them. Yet eternity is not without longing. There were nights when Zeus would walk among the ruins of his old temples, unseen by mortal eyes. He would trail his fingers across the stone, feeling the carvings worn smooth by time. Once, he found a small child leaving flowers at a broken altar. "What god do you honor?" Zeus asked, disguised as a wanderer. The boy looked up, eyes bright. "The god of thunder," he said proudly. "My grandmother says he protects us when it rains." Zeus smiled. "And what do you believe?" The boy thought for a moment. "I think thunder is the sky talking to us." The god of gods felt his heart swell. "And what does it say?" The boy grinned. "That we are alive." Zeus's throat tightened. "Then your grandmother is wiser than she knows." He left the child there, walking away into the wind, unseen tears glimmering like rain. For in that single answer, he heard the truth of immortality, not in temples or titles, but in the echo of belief carried from one generation to the next. As centuries passed, the myths continued to morph. Painters captured him not as a tyrant, but as a symbol of justice. Poets invoked him not as a ruler, but as a metaphor for conscience, order, and the eternal pulse of cause and effect. And Zeus understood. He had become more than a god. He had become an archetype, the first shape of meaning that all others would imitate. Every empire that sought balance, every leader who ruled with mercy, every soul that looked upward in wonder, carried his spark. "Do gods die?" he whispered to the wind. "Or do they simply change their faces?" From the depths of the sky came a soft, rolling answer. Not thunder, but memory stirring. The kind of sound that lives not in the air, but in the heart. And in that silence, Zeus smiled. The thunder had not ended. It had evolved. The centuries drifted like clouds. Kingdoms fell, faiths rose, and the thunder that once shook the earth became little more than a murmur in the background of time. But silence is never emptiness. It is memory holding its breath. Zeus stood upon the summit of Olympus, the world below transformed beyond recognition. The marble cities of Greece were ruins now, swallowed by vines and earth. Mortals no longer prayed to his name. They built towers of glass and metal instead of temples. They looked not to the heavens for answers, but to themselves. And yet he did not rage. He watched. He listened. He remembered. Each storm that rolled across the horizon still carried his rhythm. Each flash of lightning still bore his signature. But now no one called it divine, they called it nature. A faint smile touched his lips. "They have given new names to old wonders," he murmured. "Perhaps that is the truest form of faith." Hera joined him, her once queenly radiance softer now, like sunlight through mist. "Do you not feel forgotten?" she asked. "Our statues crumble, our names fade. The mortals who once built temples to us now build machines to chase the lightning itself." Zeus looked at her gently. "If they have learned to chase the storm, then they have learned from me." Her brow furrowed. "You would have them become gods?" "No," he said softly. "Only that they learn why gods existed, to teach balance. To remind them that power must walk hand in hand with restraint." The wind carried their words down to the earth, where a storm was gathering over the sea. Lightning split the sky, and for a brief moment, the waves shimmered with light so pure it felt alive. A ship caught in that tempest would later tell tales of how the sky spoke. Though no one could say what it said, Zeus knew. It was a whisper of remembrance. One last song of the storm. He turned to Athena, who stood nearby, gazing down upon the world's cities that pulsed like constellations. "They have become thinkers," she said proudly. "Philosophers, scientists, dreamers. They no longer fear us. They seek to understand us." Zeus nodded. "And in understanding us, they understand themselves." Athena looked at him, thoughtful. "Then perhaps we have succeeded. Perhaps this silence is not death, but completion." He smiled faintly. "Completion is the language of peace." Below, in a quiet village, a child was reading an old book by candlelight. Its pages told stories of gods long gone, of Zeus, of Hera, of Athena, of Poseidon. Her parents had told her these were myths, fables from a simpler time. But as the wind howled outside and thunder rolled softly in the distance, she whispered, "Thank you," to the sky. The candle flickered. Zeus felt it. A single mortal voice, small but sincere, cutting through centuries of disbelief. It was not worship, it was gratitude. And that was enough. He closed his eyes. The memory of the world passed before him like a vision. Gaia's awakening, Cronus's fall, the wars of titans and giants, the rise of men and the birth of ideas. Every age was a thread, woven into one vast tapestry, the fabric of existence itself. And in every era, one thing remained constant: the search for meaning. That, he realized, was his true creation, not thunder, not law, but the eternal human impulse to seek what lies beyond. Hera placed her hand upon his arm. "Will you rest now?" "Rest?" he echoed, his voice distant but warm. "Not rest. I will listen." "To what?" "To the silence after the storm." As the night deepened, Olympus shimmered faintly in the clouds, half visible, half memory. The gods no longer held councils or feasts. They wandered quietly through their immortal halls, reflections of what once was. But there was no sorrow, only calm. For even gods must sleep, if only to dream the world anew. Far below, the child finished her story and blew out her candle. The darkness that followed was not frightening. It was full, like the hush between thunder and rain. In that stillness, the echo of Olympus lingered. Not as command, not as fear, but as comfort. A reminder that divinity had not vanished. It had merely moved inward into the heart of humankind. Zeus opened his eyes one last time and looked upon the world. Cities flickered like stars. Rivers shone like veins of silver. And for a moment, it seemed the earth itself was breathing. "The storm is over," he said softly, "but its echo will last forever." A final roll of thunder drifted across the sky, gentle, content, eternal. When belief sleeps, what awakens it again? Perhaps memory, perhaps awe, or perhaps the quiet certainty that somewhere, High above, the sky still listens. And in that listening, the gods remain. The silence after the storm did not mean the end. It meant equilibrium, a balance ancient, invisible, and necessary. From the beginning, Zeus had ruled not as a tyrant, but as the embodiment of harmony between chaos and order. Yet only now, as eternity stretched into calm, did he truly understand what that meant. For balance was not victory, it was acceptance. He stood alone upon Olympus, the world below wrapped in twilight. The stars flickered like embers in the hearth of the cosmos. Each pulse of light seemed to whisper the same truth. Everything must coexist. Light and shadow, birth and decay, gods and men. Athena appeared beside him, her presence serene, her armor dimmed with the patina of time. The mortals flourish, she said. They build, they question, they seek wisdom. They no longer need us. Zeus's eyes softened. And because they no longer need us, they are closer to us than ever. She tilted her head. Explain. When they feared us, they obeyed, Zeus said. But now that they have learned to balance faith with reason, emotion with logic, they walk the same path we once did. Creation itself is balance, Athena. Chaos gave birth to order, and from that, life. We are not their masters. We are their reflection. Athena smiled faintly. Then perhaps your rule was never meant to last forever, only until they learned to carry it themselves. He nodded. The greatest ruler is the one who makes himself unnecessary. Hera joined them then, her golden crown faintly glowing. And what of us? She asked quietly. If they no longer pray, if they no longer speak our names, what becomes of the gods? Zeus looked toward the horizon, where dawn was beginning to bloom. We become what we always were, the principles within them. I am justice and thunder. You are devotion and law. Athena is wisdom. Poseidon is persistence. Hades is truth. We do not die, Hera. We transform. For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the light return to the world. Below, humanity moved with quiet determination. Farmers tended their fields. Teachers shared knowledge. Artists painted the heavens in colors unseen by the ancients. They did not know the gods still watched, but they lived as though Olympus existed within their hearts. Zeus's voice was soft, like the echo of rain. The world has found its rhythm again. The pendulum swings between chaos and peace, never stopping, always learning. This is the eternal balance, the heartbeat of creation. Athena nodded. And what of you, father? Where do you fit in this balance now? Zeus smiled, the kind of smile only an immortal could wear, both weary and fulfilled. I am the pause between lightning and thunder, the breath between justice and mercy. I am the silence that follows truth. He turned, lifting his hand toward the heavens. Lightning danced briefly between his fingers, then vanished. Not in anger, but in harmony. Once, I believed power meant control, he continued. Now I know it means alignment. The storm does not destroy, it restores. The same force that shatters also nourishes. That is what I have always been. The winds around them stirred gently, carrying echoes of laughter from the mortal world below. It was not the worship of old, it was life itself, celebrating simply by existing. Hera watched, her eyes glimmering. Perhaps this was always the purpose, she whispered. Not to rule forever, but to keep the cycle turning. Zeus placed a hand over hers. Even the universe breathes, my queen. Expansion, contraction, beginning, end. We are only its rhythm. Athena bowed slightly. Then the story is not of gods ruling men, but of creation teaching itself balance through us. Exactly, Zeus said. The thunder was never mine alone. It belongs to every heartbeat, every storm, every truth that dares to exist. Below them, lightning flickered across distant clouds. Not violent, not loud, but gentle, illuminating the horizon in a soft golden pulse. It was the same light that had begun everything, the spark from chaos, the fire from Prometheus, the glow of thought in mortal minds. Zeus watched it, calm and complete. Do you hear it? He asked. Athena listened. What? The world, he said, it no longer needs our thunder to stay alive. It carries its own. And she did hear it then. The rhythm of oceans against shores, the sigh of wind through trees, the heartbeat of human civilization pulsing like a living constellation. It was the sound of balance. From that day forward, Olympus became quiet, not in sorrow, but in fulfillment. The gods no longer interfered, no longer demanded. They became the unseen order behind existence itself, the forces that kept the stars aligned, the tides steady, the seasons in rhythm. Zeus no longer ruled with lightning. He ruled with silence, with patience, with understanding. And whenever mortals looked to the heavens and felt a strange calm before a storm, they were feeling him, the balance between fear and faith, between end and renewal. Perhaps, he murmured, that is why thunder always follows lightning, sound chasing light, humility chasing brilliance. The words lingered in the air like poetry. Athena smiled. Then the balance endures. Always, always, Zeus echoed, as dawn broke over the earth, painting the clouds in gold. The sky seemed to hum with quiet promise. The world below stirred, alive and unaware of the divine harmony watching over it. From the highest peak of Olympus, the god who once ruled all creation closed his eyes, content at last to simply be. For power fades, but balance is eternal. There comes a moment in every great story when the voice grows softer. Not because it has run out of words, but because it no longer needs to speak. That moment had come for Olympus. The mountain that once roared with the laughter of gods now stood still, crowned with cloud and silence. The marble halls were dusted in gold sunlight. The air filled not with divine command but with memory. Zeus stood alone before the grand colonnade where the thrones of eternity once shimmered. They were empty now, symbols, not seats. Hera's chair lay wrapped in ivy. Athena's owl perched silently upon her armrest, wings tucked in peace. The gods had not died. They had simply dissolved into the fabric of existence, like stars fading into morning. He ran his hand along the cracked stone, feeling the heartbeat of centuries beneath his fingers. The mountain still lived, even if its court did not. The world moves without us now, he murmured, and yet, it still carries our rhythm. A faint wind answered, brushing through the columns. It sounded almost like laughter, Hera's perhaps, or Apollo's, the echo of companionship that never truly leaves those who once shared eternity. Zeus walked through the grand hall, his footsteps echoing like distant thunder. On the walls were carvings of every age, the Titanomachy, the rise of man, the gift of fire, the forging of law. He paused before a single depiction, himself hurling lightning toward the heavens, his eyes fierce and young. You were so certain then, he whispered to his younger self, so sure that power alone could preserve what you loved. The silence replied with the honesty of time. Outside, the mortal world continued to grow. Far below Olympus, cities glowed like constellations across the earth. Men no longer looked to the skies for miracles. They created their own ships that conquered the sea, machines that captured lightning. Zeus smiled. They have learned my craft. In every spark of electricity, he saw a mirror of his own thunder. In every flash of inspiration, he felt Athena's wisdom. In every act of love, Hera's devotion. The gods were not gone. They had merely changed their form, scattered like divine atoms across creation. He turned toward the edge of the mountain. Clouds swirled below, thick and silver. Somewhere within them, he could almost hear the laughter of Dionysus drifting like wine-scented air, the rustle of Demeter's fields, the rhythm of Poseidon's tides. Olympus was quiet, but not empty. Then, a voice broke the stillness. Do you ever regret it? Zeus turned. It was Athena, her presence soft as moonlight, her armor dimmed to gray. She no longer carried her spear, only calm. Regret what? He asked. Letting go. He looked back at the clouds. How could I regret what was never truly mine to hold? Creation was never meant to be possessed, only witnessed. She smiled gently. You've grown wiser than the myths ever told. He chuckled. The myths were always written by those who needed thunder to believe. Perhaps silence frightens them. Athena stepped closer. And yet, even silence speaks. They still whisper your name, Father, sometimes as Zeus, sometimes as Jupiter, sometimes as something nameless. You've become a symbol now, not of rule, but of balance. Zeus nodded slowly. Then let that be my legacy. The air shimmered faintly around them. From the depths of the mountain, a low hum began to rise, the kind that lives not in sound but in memory. It was the last echo of Olympus, resonating through the stone, the sky, the stars. He closed his eyes, listening. The hum carried the voices of ages, the cries of titans, the hymns of mortals, the laughter of gods. It was the sound of history itself exhaling. And within it, he heard something unexpected. Gratitude. Not worship, not pleading. Just gratitude. The mortals below no longer prayed to Zeus, but they thanked the sky when rain fell. They thanked the earth when crops grew. They thanked the lightning when it powered their homes. Gratitude had evolved beyond religion, it had become instinct. That, Zeus said softly, is the proof that we never left them. Athena nodded, her eyes glistening. So what happens now? He looked upward. Now we fade not as gods, but as harmony. The sky will hold our memory. The wind will carry our stories. And when they look upward in wonder, they will find us again, within themselves. A single bolt of lightning shimmered across the horizon, thin and golden, not of wrath but of remembrance. The light stretched across the sky, touching mountain peaks, oceans, forests, and cities. For a heartbeat, the entire world glowed in unity. Zeus breathed deeply. Do you feel that? It's not thunder, it's connection. Athena smiled. The gods and men finally equals. He turned to her, his expression soft with the kind of peace only immortality could teach. The storm began with me, but the silence belongs to them. They stood together as the last echo of Olympus faded into eternity. The mountain did not crumble. It simply slept, veiled in mist and memory. And down below, a single child gazed up at the night sky, watching the lightning flicker across the clouds. Papa, she whispered. The sky just smiled. Perhaps it did, for the thunder was gone. But the echo endured. And if the sky remembers, do we ever truly forget? Night had fallen over the world once more, soft, endless, and filled with the quiet shimmer of stars. The mountain of Olympus, once the beating heart of heaven, now slept beneath veils of silver mist. But even in that stillness, something living stirred, the memory of thunder. Zeus stood at the edge of eternity, looking down upon the earth that had long outgrown his reign. The air was cool, carrying the scent of distant rain. Below him stretched a civilization unrecognizable from the one he had first ruled. Vast cities glowing like constellations, rivers lit by the reflection of human creation, not divine fire. They no longer spoke his name, but their lights reached for the heavens as though they still believed. He smiled faintly. They build towers now, not temples, but the desire is the same, always to touch the sky. Athena appeared beside him, her presence like the last note of a song. And we are still the melody they hum without knowing, she said softly. He nodded. Yes, they call it progress, but I call it remembrance. Together, they watched the movement of the earth, the dance of tides, the slow turn of stars, the pulsing glow of human life. To mortals, it was the work of science and time. To Zeus, it was harmony, the same rhythm that had begun when chaos first breathed the universe awake. Do you miss the noise? Athena asked. The prayers, the hymns, the festivals? Zeus smiled. Once, yes, but prayers were always echoes of fear. This silence, they no longer cry for help. They create, they love, they endure. That is the purest hymn of all. He lifted his hand toward the horizon, and lightning flickered far away. Faint, golden, tender. Not a weapon now, but a heartbeat in the clouds. Hera's voice drifted from behind them, calm and regal. You've gone quiet, my king. No commands left to give. Zeus turned. Command? No, only observation. The universe no longer needs rulers. It needs witnesses. She smiled sadly. And what do we witness? The cycle, he said simply. Creation giving birth to creation. Balance renewing itself. The gods fading into memory so that mortals can rise into purpose. They fell silent again. Below them, a storm began to form over the Mediterranean. A soft rain that shimmered under moonlight. Fishermen would later swear that the clouds shaped themselves like a crown, that thunder rolled like laughter, and that for a brief moment, the sea glowed gold. Zeus's eyes softened. Even the storms remember. Hera reached for his hand. Then perhaps that is immortality. Not endless life, but endless remembrance. He looked at her and nodded. Exactly. We are not gone. We are written into the rhythm of the world. The fire in the forge, the justice in the heart, the light after the storm. As they spoke, the clouds parted, revealing the endless stretch of stars. Some had names given by ancient tongues: Orion, Cassiopeia, Lyra, each a memory of love, defiance, or beauty. And among them, faint but eternal, shone one constellation that mortals would never rename: the eagle of Zeus, its wings spread in perpetual flight. He watched it quietly, his gaze filled with a strange tenderness. That, he whispered, is my legacy. Not the throne, not the war, but the reminder that power can rise and fall, yet meaning endures. Athena turned to him. And what will you do now, father of thunder? Zeus took a long breath. The air shimmered faintly around him, the scent of ozone and rain mingling in perfect calm. I will rest, he said, not in sleep, but in stillness. I will become what I always was meant to be, the quiet pulse behind the storm. He stepped forward to the mountain's edge. Lightning rippled once across the sky, bright as dawn, then faded into a soft glow that illuminated the clouds like gold dust. His form began to dissolve into the light, not vanishing but merging, his essence folding into the heavens themselves. Athena and Hera watched in silence. The air grew warm, the mountain humming with life, and as Zeus became one with the sky, his final words lingered like a whisper on the wind. Tell them, the storm sleeps, but it remembers. A gentle rain began to fall across the earth. In the fields of Greece, droplets struck the soil like silver notes. In distant cities, thunder rolled softly across the skyline, not in anger, but as lullaby. Children pressed their faces to the windows, counting the spaces between flashes. In those spaces, between light and sound, between fear and wonder, the memory of Olympus lived on. Not as myth, not as worship, but as story. For stories are immortal. They are the bridges between time and meaning, the threads that bind gods to men, and men to eternity. As the storm moved west, its echo crossed oceans and mountains, finding its way into every whisper of wind, every rumble of rain. And somewhere, a poet looked up at the sky and wrote a single line: even gods dream, and the sky remembers. The clouds shifted, glowing faintly with distant lightning. A smile seemed to stretch across the heavens. Zeus was gone, but the sky forever remembered. And as the echoes of Olympus fade into the night, may your dreams drift softly through the clouds, where thunder still hums like memory. Rest beneath the ancient sky, and when you wake, may the stories of the gods remind you that balance, like lightning, always returns.